I've apologies for absence from Jim Gardner, Chief Medical Officer, John. Here today, welcome, John. You, Diane, joining us late. Services items. Welcome also to Janny, who's here for on behalf of Peter, who sends. There's also apologies from Siobhan and Sarah Walker today. Firstly, before I start, I want to apologise to people who would normally attend our meeting. We have regular members of the public come to our meeting. Their attendance is better than many of our directors. Today, for a combination of reasons beyond our control, we're unable to meet in a room in which members of the public can attend in person. And it's a mess up on our part. I'm a bit grumpy about it, but live streaming will hopefully work throughout the meeting, so at least we can be observed in real time. But I'm sorry that this has happened and that people are unable to come. We'll work hard to make sure this doesn't happen. Okay. We have received a number of questions in advance of the meeting, most of which come in regarding women's services, and Jenny will pick up in update later in the agenda. But we start today with a patient story, the Honeysuckle bereavement service. Fantastic story, and Jenny, perhaps you can introduce this.
Thank you, Chair. So for those who don't know, the Honeysuckle team are the baby bereavement team at Liverpool Women's who provide care for women and their families following pregnancy loss. Within the team, we've got some experience midwives, and they offer one-to-one support, guidance on memory making, assistance with funeral arrangements, baby loss certificates, all sorts of things to wrap around the family. And we've also got a partnership with Liverpool Football Club for the Honeysuckle FC, for a safe space for dads as well to go and meet together. So today we've got Nikki and Claire, who are patients of ours, past patients of ours, who've come to share their story, and Jenna, who's one of our obstetricians who supports the Rainbow Clinic. And the Rainbow Clinic won the Executive Managing Directors Award recent, dedicated to excellence. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic team. So just for context, 1 in 4 or up to 1 in 4 pregnancies could end in baby loss, and our annual remembrance service is really, full of people who come together to remember such important babies. So thank you for coming. Just to warn people, you might find some things a little bit upsetting, or if you're in your own personal circumstances. So just want to put that out there. But I'll hand over to the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. As Jenny said, my name is Jana Vitchins. I'm the Director of Midwifery at Liverpool Women's. I'm really proud of the team. So we've got Claire and Nikki here today. Our first slide is really just setting out our service and how busy it is at the moment, unfortunately. So when we go to the first slide there, you'll see there is over 800 miscarriages in a year. So 16 stillbirths, and you can see there. So it's really to set the scene and really thank the team for everything they do, but this is really about Nikki and Claire and their experience. So over to Nikki and Claire. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nikki. I might get upset, I apologise. So yeah, I got pregnant at 37 at the end, and all my friends have probably 2 kids and happy families, and they're all getting old now and stuff, and this was my first, so I was like the last of everyone. So it didn't cross my mind that anything could go wrong. Didn't even contemplate that. And all the scans and everything were fine, and everything was going great as far as I knew. And then I got to the 20-week scan, which I just treated like any other day, to be honest. I just thought I'd get a chance to see the baby and then I'll go back to work. So I even spoke to someone in the morning and he asked me to do some work, and I said, I'm just going for a scan and I'll do it this afternoon when I get back. I had all the post-it notes of what I was meant to do. And then I went to the scan, and it was on the Wednesday, and the had a trainee doing everything, and checking everything, and she got to when she was like, oh, it's all fine, but I can't find, I haven't been able to check this, this and this, but she was training, so it's fine. So the radiographer took over and she said, oh, I'll just start looking. And she paused it for a while on the heart, and I didn't really think much of it. And then she said, I'm just going to get someone else into the room. And I thought, we don't generally do that unless something's wrong. So I thought, that's not good. And then they got a lady in and they sort of whispered amongst themselves. And they said, we're just going to refer you to cardiology because we've seen something, but we don't really know, and it's not our specialty, we can't say. So I said, well, is it bad? And they said, oh, we can't say. But then the atmosphere was just like so different after that. It was so chatty and friendly before, and it was like, oh, here's this and here's that. And then after that, it just felt like she didn't really say anything about anything else. Like, they hadn't found the brain at that point, and she didn't say, oh, here's a, I don't know, it just seemed so different. And I just cried because I just felt like it wasn't good. And I said, how long would it be? And they said, usually within a week you'll get referred. So it's like, okay. But I just thought, it's going to be the worst week of my life, probably. And so we left. And all they said was that they noticed that the left was a little bit smaller than the right. And I got as far as Volkswagen garage because I picked a car up from the service. When I Googled it, there's only one condition that came up, and I thought that's strange because you'd think there'd be more than that. And the next day I just started reading because I just thought I want to go into whatever it is. I just want to read about everything. So at least I've got an idea before I get to the scan of all the things it could possibly be. And they rang me the afternoon of the scan and said, we've booked you in. So it was Wednesday afternoon, they rang me and said, booked you in Friday morning with fetal medicine. And I just thought that doesn't sound good either because it's so soon after. And I just felt like, why would it be so quick if everyone was okay? And so the Thursday was probably one of the worst days because I was Googling all the stuff, and everyone just says, oh, you'll be fine, I'll be fine. My friend did this, my friend's baby had this, it was all great and whatever. So we went to fetal medicine and they were brilliant. They did lots of scans and they said, it's, she left me, said, I'm going to do a plan to birth and I'm going to draw you a diagram or something. And they left me with another lady who just carried on scanning, and she took loads of pictures for us, and it was really nice. And we saw our baby yawn, and we didn't know the gender or anything at the time. We saw like a yawn, and it was so lovely. But again, it just felt like she was taking lots of pictures. It just felt like she was building memories for us because it wasn't good. And the diagram took a very long time to draw because in my head I was thinking, well, I hope it's a hole in the heart or something they can just fix, which is ironic. And then, it took ages to draw it, and then she brought us in the room and she basically said, this is how the heart should work and this is how your baby's heart does work. And basically the left side didn't work at all. So nothing would flow through. So basically the right side was doing everything, which is fine in the womb. This is my understanding, I could be wrong, but my understanding is it's fine in the womb because there's a little flap that's open and makes it work. But once they're out of the room, that flap closes and basically the heart wouldn't work. And he said that it was HLHS and that the severity was 10 out of 10. And that was the sort of best case scenario because as she grew, it would get worse because the body would grow and it would rely more on the heart. And so basically we had three choices, and one was to carry on and see how the pregnancy went, and then the second one was to we could terminate the pregnancy now if we wanted to. Basically there were options, and we decided that the life expectancy of HLHS is maybe 20 years and involves operations throughout the whole life and a heart transplant, and that's if you're lucky. And we were basically told that the chances were she wasn't going to make it to term, let alone past that or any of the operations. So we decided that we would terminate, which I hate saying because that's the worst part of it all. To be told that like she's got a condition that's life limiting, but then you have to choose. It's like the worst thing. So that's what I struggle with still. I said, could we come in a week later? And they said, because of doctor's strikes, we had to come in on the Monday or maybe 10 days after that. I just couldn't. The thought that she was growing and could be in pain was too hard. So we said, we'll come in on Monday. And I think we first met Honeysuckle the Monday morning, but it's just a blur because that day was horrible. And they said she'd be born within 24 hours of the Monday. But then it didn't go to plan and the pessaries didn't work and various other things. So she wasn't actually born until the Thursday morning. But it was really like the best day. We had the nicest day with her. Which sounds strange, but we were just at peace being with her. And then we met Marie from Honeysuckle, and we were so tired because we'd been on going on for days. But she told us about the monthly group and about the remembrance service, about the football team, just everything really. And it was all a bit of a blur, but it's a remembrance service that stuck out because it's baby last week, the week after. And she said we could put a name on the board if you wanted to, or on the screen strip. Like if we gave the name and like soon we could put a name on the screen, and we just wanted to exist somewhere. So we decided we wanted to get the service. We actually called her Blue, which is a funny name really, but it's just because when she was 7 weeks, she was the size of a blueberry. And we called her Lentil before that. And then the next week it was Kidney Bean, and I was like, that's just terrible. So we just stuck with Blueberry, but then that got short to Blue, and then it just stuck. And then when they said, what do you want to call her, it just felt like appropriate to just stick with the name stuff for 14 weeks rather than a name that we hadn't even had time to think of yet. So yeah, so we had Blue on the Thursday, and then we went to the remembrance service. I think it was the Tuesday, and Marie recognised us, which was lovely. And I remember like our community midwife just sort of dropped me like the next day. I got home on the Friday, and then she came on the Saturday and said, oh, well, you look like you're fine. So had to be done unless you signed off, which I thought was great because obviously I didn't even know what my name was at that point. So it was only thank God for like Marie, who then phoned to check in on us and said, have you got any questions, do you need any help? You know, is there anything you're not sure of? So she just kept in touch with us. And I thought, well, I may as well go to the monthly meetings because like, why not? And the monthly meetings are so lovely at Honeysuckle because they put you in touch with, like, that's where I met Claire. I actually got a friend, weirdly, at my first meeting. But you meet people who have gone through baby loss, which in itself is amazing because you have normal conversations about nothing, but just knowing you're with someone who gets it makes all the difference in the world because your friends don't really get it. They say they don't really. And even I wouldn't have before this. I would have just thought I was just something you worked through and you're fine. But it just never leaves you, which I didn't appreciate. And so yeah, we go to the monthly meetings. My boyfriend joined the football team, even though he's older and he keeps getting injured, and he's got a hamstring injury right now and can't walk or cycle or do anything. So he loves that. So yeah, it was a really horrific time, to be honest, like really horrific. But thank God for Honeysuckle to get us through it, to be honest. I don't know what to do about those people and about those meetings. And even like I had retained placenta, but it was 8 weeks after the birth, so it was unexpected. And Honeysuckle were the ones that helped me and got me in touch with the doctor to work out like why it might have happened and give me answers. And then I found out I was pregnant 6 months after we lost Blue. But I had some bleeds, so I had to keep going in because I kept thinking I'd miscarried. So that was just horrendous because I thought I'm either going to miscarry or there's going to be something wrong with the baby, or you hear other stories as well, so you panic about everything. But luckily, everything was going quite well, and the heart scans were great. Fetal medicine were brilliant again. Honeysuckle helped me get a 20-week scan because I just, for some reason, they just wouldn't put me in. So they were amazing because I phoned up on panic saying I can't get the scan, and I'm 20 weeks in like 3 days. And within about an hour, I had a scan booked in. So it was all things like that where you're so stressed and so upset by it all anyway. Just to have someone there that helps you through makes all the difference. And then it's only through them that I found about Rainbow. So that's how I got referred to the Rainbow Clinic about 24 weeks, I think. I met Jenna, who's possibly the nicest person on the planet, to be honest. I've never met anyone nicer. And you sort of said at the time it's more for like our mental health, if anything, because the babies looked fine and there was no reason to think something would go wrong, but mentally you just panic all the time because you just know all these things that can go wrong and you just can't control it. And just, I don't know why, because anything could go wrong in any day of the week, but knowing I had a scan in a week's time just kept me going. So like, I'm getting movement, saying Jenna, like it will keep me going till Christmas. So we just kept repeatedly bugging Jenna basically and updates. But again, I don't know what I'd have done without it because your mental health when you go through a rainbow pregnancy is crazy. I'd say I'm quite a rational person, but I was not a rational person last year. And yeah, luckily we had little Teddy in December 20th, just before Christmas. Anyway, I did some pictures. I think
There's that pictures now.
Yeah.
Yes, just shared the.
that was when I was 9 weeks pregnant with Blue. We were on holiday and no one knew, so we just did some secret pictures. They're probably not very flash and page. You can move on to the next one. That's the day we found out about the HLHS because we used to take pictures of the Iron Men with family members and things, and we just wanted one with her in it, even though she was only in the belly. That was a horrific day. And then that was after we had her, which I remember that photograph because they're saying smile, but I'd just given birth to a baby that wasn't with us. So I just couldn't smile, but I don't know, that was the weirdest photo ever. I don't know what the next one is, to be honest. But that's it, feet. So we keep that on our phone and share that with people because she was like a little human, even though she was only like 21 weeks. And then that's Teddy's feet. Me and my boyfriend have got tattoos of Blue's handprints on our wrists. So we just did a photo of the tattoos on his feet. The next one. That's Teddy. That's off of it, but we've just been on holiday to Stockholm for the weekend and it was brilliant. So that was our little photo from the other day. So yeah, basically about honeysuckle, I don't know if I'd have survived the first 6 months. And without Rainbow, I don't know if I'd have survived the pregnancy. So it's just, yeah, it's just got us through the last 18 months of our lives and we couldn't be more grateful, to be honest. Of all the services we've used, they're the only ones that have ever been consistently amazing. And yeah, I'm just so glad. And I still go to the meetings now because it's just nice to have friends that get it.
Hi, I'm Claire. So I have a daughter who's Freya 14, I'm who's 6, and obviously I got pregnant with Freddie in December 2022. Perfect sort of few weeks, nothing seemed to sort of be out of the ordinary. Obviously exactly the same as my other pregnancies. Having a 20-week scan, absolutely fine. And you kind of relax a little bit, you don't think for 1 second anything's going to go wrong. Had to bleed about, I think it was 29 weeks, so went to the women's, they checked me, couldn't find where the bleed came from, so they said sometimes well, that just happens. And then I got to 31 weeks and 5 days, and I woke up one morning and basically Freddie, I didn't know what was happening, boy or girl, but Freddie was always really, really like an active baby, always active at the night time, and then he'd be a bit sleepy in the morning, so just had a weird feeling one morning. So got to about lunchtime. I said to my husband, I haven't felt the baby, you know, I don't know. And he was like, oh, be okay, have some coke, have some sugar, you know. So I went on my side. I thought, no, left it a couple more hours. I don't know why I did, but when you've never experienced anything like that, you just think maybe I'm just overthinking stuff, you know. So I got to the afternoon and I was like, no, something's not right. I haven't felt anything all day. So dropped my girls off at my in-laws and then we went to the hospital. My husband played some music to my tummy and Daddy would always go crazy whenever he used to hear music in my tummy and nothing. And you just have this sinking feeling. So got to the women's and I spoke to the staff there and she said, I'll never forget, she was quite dismissive initially. She said, don't worry, you know, everyone comes in, they'll produce movements, it'll be fine. And I was like, okay. So you kind of think, oh, maybe I am just overreacting. We had 2 people in trying to use the Doppler, trying to find the heartbeat. And they said sometimes baby can be in a different sort of position. Might be at the back, it's hard to find the heartbeat. Anyway, like more senior member staff came in, they tried, and they said, right, we're going to send you for a scan. Obviously, we're struggling a little bit. And yeah, I'll never forget, I was sort of looking at my husband and everyone's face just changed. They didn't even have to tell me. But then the lady put her hands on me and just said, I'm so sorry. And the world just sort of, I don't know, just stops in that moment. And I just thought, what have they just told me? I can't even understand what's been said. So they said, well, after she went through a few options, they said, you can either go home or we can kind of start the procedure. Now, bear in mind, me and my husband basically had the clothes that we were wearing. We didn't expect that sort of thing. So we said, no, we can't go home, can't pretend that everything's okay to our children. So we're just going to have to go through sort of like the procedure. And I didn't have a clue. Like, obviously had to go and give birth. And at that moment, I didn't know I was having a boy, but obviously going off track a little bit. My dad passed away a couple of years ago. We always wanted a grandson, never got one from any of us. So I said to the midwife, it's a boy, and I'm having. She said, oh, did you find out what you're having? I said, no, but I know he's going to be a boy. Anyway, I had to make the calls to my mum and my husband's mum, and just the worst thing ever. obviously went through, had obviously the procedure. We had Freddie about 24 hours later, and like Nick said, it was like a weird experience, even though you're going through this. When you obviously hold your baby, it's sort of a nice feeling, but obviously you don't really understand what's going on, do you? It's sort of like, yeah, I think it's the thought of how am I going to get through this time now and not have a baby when all of a sudden, you know, you've got to go and tell people. So obviously we spent a lot of, we met Marie, I think sorry if I'm going off track, my brain goes everywhere. We met Marie the morning after we'd lost Freddie, and she was just the most lovely person. She just explained everything, like any questions. We had Freddie blessed by the chaplain in the hospital, which was just lovely. We had the family come in and meet him. And then we were lucky enough to spend the next sort of 4 or 5 days with Freddie. And then we spent so much time, we came back into the hospital every day. Honeysuckle arranged for us to spend a lot of time. You'll see in a minute on the photos. They've got like a little nursery. I don't know if you've ever been in sort of the area, but it's just magical. And we got the children coming in and they got to hold him, and it was just really like making memories and just really nice experience. Honeysuckle just guided us through everything. So we didn't have a clue that we needed to do a funeral and everything. And they obviously pointed us in the right direction. And this funeral company did it for free for us. And, you know, they didn't believe that sort of you should have to pay when you've sort of haven't chosen all this sort of experience. But it was just, yeah, Honeysuckle saved us, absolutely saved us. Husband sort of like was a bit dubious about going to support groups. I said, come on, we'll give it a go. First one was a bit sort of like we weren't sure, and we said, no, we'll try again. And just, yeah, ever since we've basically haven't missed one, I don't think, really, have we? Very, very few. And that's where we met Nick and her husband, partner. And yeah, they've just guided us through everything. And then actually we were lucky enough to get pregnant with our little Louis. And this is where I met Jenna, poor Jenna. Got harassed by me for pretty much 6 months. But like, as I say, I think without the rainbow, I don't even think I would have got through that pregnancy. Jenna would, well, at the drop of a hat, basically, she'd come in early, you know, from a shift, or she'd stay late, even on a birthday weekend. She came in. I don't know if you remember that. You weren't meant to come in, and you were like, it's okay. And, you know, she arranged, her and her sort of staff and stuff were just so supportive through everything. And I just felt like I was just hugged. And it was a really surreal, you did my cesarean and everything. And it was just the most magical moment to have someone who I grew so close to support, to actually tell me that I've got another little boy. And we all got emotional. And then he's named after your little boy, isn't it? So yeah, it was just, and it was quite weird to then not see you, like, pretty much every week.
Lovely baby.
I said to Chris, my husband, I was like, oh, poor Jenna, she thought she got rid of me. But no, I can't tell you how amazing, like, the hospital, Honeysuckle, Rainbow, and everything that they sort of do for parents and women in Liverpool who've gone through sort of miscarriage and stillbirth and medical reasons. It's just, yeah. I honestly, from someone who's gone through it, yeah, I don't even know personally if I'd be here without all that support, to be honest with you.
You showed the pictures.
Yeah. And that's only was just born. That's the little room where in the women's, it's like a little nursery, and the girl read stories to him, and it was lovely. Like Nick said, it's so weird when you've got to try and smile when it's just, but I'm glad we've got those little pictures, to be honest, to look back on. The sadness in the girl that just It's our little Louis.
This is the football club that we work with within the community. And I think we've got the, as you can see, the names of the babies that have lost are on the dad's shirts. And then we've got final part, any question. Just a very short
Been going through a couple of operations all day, and then just sadly passed away on the 22nd of December.
My daughter Evie Robin, we lost her at was 26 weeks.
The Honeysuckle team is the bereavement team at Liverpool Women's Hospital. We provide advice and support for families following pregnancy loss, stillbirth and early neonatal death. Losing a baby can be a devastating experience for the whole family. Society often focuses on support for the mum, but we know that men grieve too. We asked the men how we could improve support for them. They told us they'd like a safe space where they come together to share their story and support one another on their journey. They also mentioned sport as a way of coming together, releasing energy and doing something in remembrance of their baby. In view of their feedback, they empowered us to contact the LFC Foundation, and the story of Honeysuckle FC began.
Teams like this can help people. It's not forced. It's led by the lads because it's something they're interested in and it's something that they want. So naturally they can take on the responsibilities that running a football team has.
If you're on your own and you've lost a child, you're dealing with that in your own sort of little cocoon, if you like, because dads are not great, fellas are not great at expressing their emotions and their feelings. And then to get the opportunity and the bravery to come together, once you're here, you've crossed that barrier, haven't you?
Giving people the opportunity to come and have a space where they can talk and not have to worry about someone understanding where they're coming from or what they've been through.
Getting guys together, talking about how they feel, it'll be absolutely brilliant.
Well,
Been going through a couple
thank you very much indeed for coming along and sharing your stories, and Jenna and Jan. It's really a wonderful service that, as Nikki and Claire have said, has been so important to them and their families. So very powerful and emotionally charged story, and we really appreciate you sharing all of that with us. I'm going to ask if there's any points any board members would like to make or questions they'd like to ask while you're still here, if that's okay. If anybody could speak. So say thank you. Yes, Sue.
Is there anything we could have done additionally just for any improvements? I mean, really appreciate stories, but we always want to improve and develop. But is there anything in addition we could have done in the journey?
I always felt like the Honeysuckle and Rainbow were quite stretched. So I always felt like we needed more support, I suppose. Like Honeysuckle's definitely grown a lot. I've noticed it just the whole time I've been going.
Yeah.
The teams grow, and then because a lot fell on Marie, it felt. But same with Rainbow, felt like Jenna was getting pulled in every direction, like coming in on the
Never moan, never ever moan. You've always got that lovely smile on your face.
Yeah.
Nothing's too much, doesn't
Exactly. So I feel it's a bit stretched. I remember it was the start of December and you were saying, are you sure you don't want to come in? I was like, no, it's fine, I'm on holiday, I'll be okay. But you were like, I'll come in on the Tuesday. I was like, no, I'm not bringing you on holiday, but I just say that they're a bit stretched. So it's just because I know there's some people don't even know about it. I think that's partly because there's probably no space for them. Because I did speak to Honeysuckle, put me in touch with a woman who'd been through the same condition, HLHS, and she was on a rainbow baby, who's really struggling with the pregnancy. And I spoke to her and she didn't even know about Rainbow Clinic. So I told her to contact Honeysuckle and to contact the Rainbow team, because I think there's a lot of women out there that probably haven't even managed to get an appointment because it's probably not advertised as much, possibly because it just isn't big enough yet. So I think growing it would be the main thing to make sure you capture everyone, because there'll be people who are just falling through the gaps.
Thank you.
I can pick up from where Nikki finished. And so hopefully we are growing. Since Claire and Nikki went through Honeysuckle and then Rainbow Clinic, Jenna and Joni, to Honeysuckle midwives, now have a full-time day a week to dedicate to Rainbow, and they're acting as that crucial bridge between a pregnancy loss and a pregnancy after loss. But there's still so much we could do with Rainbow Clinic and Honeysuckle to get even bigger.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I mean, it's more like. It's a little transition point.
Yeah. Right. Minutes of the meeting. 3rd of April. Thank you. Sorry. Any points to proceed? Can we approve the minutes, please? On the action log. Daniel.
Yeah, sorry. There are five actions still there. Two are proposed to be closed. Action 9, which was in relation to the metrics that came out, the new operational guidance. They were actually detailed within the Chief Executive's report from the pack. There was a query in relation to the fill rate data. Again, that detail's been confirmed within the IPL. Action number 6 in relation to a patient story in relation to organ donation and transplantation. That's sort of a national requirement for us to have this discussion. We've now scheduled that. We've had to rejig the schedules on patient stories, but it's scheduled a meeting in August. If we don't have one in August, it will be September. But we've had arrangements with those. That remain open, but obviously there are some details that we'll be able to cover today. One is on no criteria to resign, which will go through part of the discussions today. And then the final one, which was in action 10, which was in relation to the mitigations relating to patients with mental health conditions. That has been updated, and the risk log for 6782, we've added additional mitigations that are contained within the risk report. So again, when we come to that issue, if there are any further questions from board members, David will be able to cover those issues.
Daniel, everyone consent? Thank you. I've not been notified of any urgent matters arising, so go straight to the Chief Executive.
I'd like to know it's still recovering from that.
Picked up a few things today. Obviously, some good stuff around the improvement journey now, which again I won't go through all of, but particularly good now to see the past diagnosis standard at the women's meeting the national standard. First time in 5 years, so that's great. We've pulled out some other stuff around maternity and gynae from the deteriorating patient collaborative, and also some of the improvements around the ED and the family test. So you can see stuff that's in the transformation plan, which is going to take us through later, still delivering in 25, beginning of 25, 26. We have recorded finally, it feels like these things have happened ages ago, but this will be the first one since we've had the Royal Urgent and Emergency Care CQC rating, which was fantastic to get rated as good for urgent care, which, as we said previously, not many organisations do, and certainly not in the current climate. We should remember as well that inspection was on one of the worst days in winter, so well done to all the team at the Royal for the good rating there. And that was also good as part of the well-led elements of urgent care. We've obviously had the well-led inspection, the report is back, and we will be able to publicly discuss that when we get notification from CQC, so that should be imminent. We then had CQC arrive at Liverpool Women's Hospital, which was only a week and a bit ago, which I'm sure Jenny will touch on, but again, we haven't got any detail, but the feedback on the day was excellent from the inspectors. So we do expect improvements on maternity services, which will be great if that happens. I also just wanted to pick out just a note, which is in the section 5, because we're obviously changing a lot over this next year around the group population. So we previously reported to the board that the new diagnostic treatment centre will basically bring together radiology, pharmacy and pathology, or LCL in that sense, into the single government structure moving forward. So when we get into the next set of board meetings, we'll see that rather than just the current LCL arrangements. And Broad Green obviously is now folded into the Royal Government as well. I've included some data on CMAST and what's going on around LAST, which again I'm sure we'll talk more about today. There was an ask last time to have better visibility of what the new planning guidance performance metrics are. So we've dropped a table in there, which hopefully everybody's had a chance to see. At the moment, that's just a description of what those standards are going to be for this year. That's what we're basing our corporate risks on. In terms of our analyses about what that looks like for us, we'll get into that as we go through the first set of IPR for those new standards, which will be next up. So you get to see more about that. And then a few things on the performance update. Pressure ulcers is still a cause for concern. We've got statistically significant deterioration now for several months, so that is now a statistical issue. So again, we may want to pick that up with David shortly. So that was the key one, I think, that we were slightly concerned about. Again, we're doing the things that we think we should be doing, but that deterioration in performance needs further review. And again, you can see the others are all performing where you would expect they are being sustained. So I wasn't going to cover anything else, but obviously the IPR is in the next section. Chair, if anyone wants to get detail around what it is. Thank you. What questions for? Just in the right part of the agenda, if we can pick up on the sort of updated story on the 4-hour performance and where we're at. Particularly if we talk later about the type 1 performance. Should we pick that up in your update?
Yeah, I can do that.
Later. Yeah. So is that? Yes. Yeah. Yes. So. Because it'll be the Royal and Aintree. Yeah. Okay. Okay. And also, we say the total number of patients not meeting criteria to reside fell to a lower position in the last 6 months. Where's the best place in the inn? Just to pick up how we've done that.
Do you want me to cover both those things? The Royal and Aintree?
And the third thing I picked up for later was on the showing significant improvement achieving the faster diagnosis standard. Just you're able to give us a flavour of how we've done that. Anything else on James's review? Thank you. Let's go in then to the group wide.
Okay, so we've got three at the moment. It should be noted, obviously, that we're reporting here retrospectively the new operational standards will start to fall into it. The first one is that 65-week wait time target is no longer part of the planning guidance going forward. We move away from that, and in my last report that we just talked about, you'll see the new targets around elective care are around no one waiting longer than, or improving the percentage of people waiting longer than 18 weeks. No one waiting longer than 18 weeks for a first appointment. And then the proportion of the people over 52 weeks on the waiting list to be 1% of the total waiting list or lower. So again, not going to test you on this, but you'll see it in the IPR next time. But I think it's fair to say that whilst the risk around 65 weeks as an elective waiting time standard will be removed, we still need to keep a weather eye on it because we've got a challenge in entry, particularly on ENT again, and pressure on ENT that's led to a significant number of patients over the 65 weeks. In the new way of reporting, that will still come out because that will come out as the percentage that are over 52 weeks. ENT will be the biggest number. So we're not going to lose the problem, if you like, or lose the issue or the focus. It'll just change about how we report it. So the 65-week risk has been taken off, and then new risks that come on into next month will include that waiting list standard, no doubt, for 52 weeks ago. That makes sense. Yeah. We've also got financial risks. So obviously the CIP programme is 25-26, initially scored at 12 now, and that's been about the reliance on non-recurrent CIPs and mitigations around that. So we've got a CIP programme in place, but until we're really confident about the ability to deliver that recurrently, it's been scored as 12. At the moment, Rob will be back shortly as to how we're doing on that first month. But at the moment, it would seem to keep that at a fairly high level of risk until we've got better assurance on the currency. The financial balance risk, again, a score of 12, driven by largely the NC2R capacity challenge, which again is a core part of the CIP this year. And then there's another risk on there that has been considered previously, which is the safeguarding risk around mental health, which Daniel referred to. And again, we can go back and update on that. David is leading on that work as required. So they're the core risks for now. It'll look different next month because it'll start to import the new standards and where we sit against that. Beth's team have done all the analysis of how we think we fare against those. So that's all been looked at. And so we'll rescore them appropriately and they'll all have a risk process for next month.
It's the time we can pick up the mental health patients.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. So colleagues will obviously recognise this risk has been on the risk register since February. We know that there's been lots of actions taken to ensure that whilst we have a high number of patients within our ED departments, their length of stay still remains problematic within the organisations. Actions are being taken to ensure that whilst they are with us, they remain safe. And the areas are safe, but it's still proving to be a challenge to reduce that length of stay, and that's reflected in some of the reports from the hospital sites also that you'll see today. One of the changes that we have seen, or the implementation, is the Cheshire Merseyside Transformation Programme, which I guess, if I'm being very honest, we were very cautious about changing the risk rating until we gave that just a little bit longer for us to be able to determine whether any changes or any actions from that are having the appropriate mediation of those lengths of stay within the organisation. And so we will do a full reappraisal of that risk for our next board.
Thank you. Well, just answer that, Chair. Also got I keep getting the name wrong in terms of the title. I keep calling her a turnaround director, which I know that is the right title, but Mandy Negra, who is now operating in Cheshire Mersey as, does anyone know the title? System oversight and improvement. So Mandy has got a large focus on urgent care, and she spoke to me just yesterday over here about the risks of mental health being in her view as well, because she's been taking a look at back to what we said on the last board, the first thing people are putting across the system is that sort of extra expenditure on placements and so on that's above cost. And all that's doing is leading to a backup into hospital. So I know she's very focused on that as well, and he's asking a lot of questions about what the system is doing to us all. So I suspect we'll see some more traction.
Okay. Into the site review. Restart for you.
Yeah, okay. So I'll start with UEC and I'll cover generally if that's okay for both sites.
Yes.
So from the Royal perspective, all types were 76% against 78% target in the national standards, and average ambulance handover times had improved again to 36 minutes. Aintree's got a bit more of a challenge on the ambulance handover times. They've obviously implemented their surge areas, and I know there's a real focus on continuing the improvement. So I think there's about a 10-minute difference at the minute between the sites, but that's a real focus for the Aintree team. From a type 1 perspective, so we're 101 out of 123 trusts in the country for March's type 1 performance. That is a challenge for us. Some of that is some adjustments. So from a Royal perspective, all the activity that goes through the emergency eye department is classed as type 2 based on national definitions. So St Paul's and all the activity we stream over to the London Party Centre, which we are streaming more now, is counted as type 3. So we don't benefit from that activity, which is why we have quite a differential in our type 1 and type 3. However, we have raised with the directors of ops the need to improve the 4-hour performance. And when you do look at it, there is quite a bit in the non-admitted that are breaching, which would be the simpler patients to be able to achieve the 4-hour compliance on. So there is a new weekly performance sort of framework going in that the directors of ops will be leading at sites with the teams to have a real drive on how we get that sort of 4-hour compliance, and that has started at the beginning of May. And you can see we discussed that in HMB. So I think improvements needed really against the 4-hour, and I've discussed that as well with Montenegro when we met this week, and that will be feeding into a performance meeting that she'll also be overseeing for Cheshire and Mersey. From a not meeting criteria to resign perspective, so we've touched on before, we've seen the reduction in the P3s. The overall number has come down, has been the lowest in 6 months, and the P3s have continued to significantly decrease over the last 4 weeks. So latest stats is we have 83 patients on a pathway 3 placement. That was 230 at this point last year. So we have massively reduced the P3 issue. We have now got the highest number of P1s we've ever had in the hospital, which is back to the thing of these are patients that can go with only support, and it's back to the top function. Again, I've had a meeting with Mandy last week. We have agreed around what we need to do on the top, and I'm meeting system partners tomorrow to come up with an implementation plan and some timescales that will fit with also our financial schedules. We will de-escalate the site. So when we come back to board next month, I'd be expecting to be able to share a much more detailed plan on what that is now going to look like, focused on the pathway ones. The P3 decrease isn't luck. That is the new processes with the brokerage we have put in place with the council and the MDTs between our wards and the social work teams now, where we review together the patient discharge pathways before we define the destination. So we're really seeing the evidence of that improvement, and we just now need to focus on the pathway ones. So I don't know if there's any questions on UEC, and I'll just move on to the board.
Yes. Another question I just wanted to add, because David can know this because we discussed it with the NHS England meeting. There was also a narrative building around long length of stay, sort of, there's a big long length of stay problem at Blood. And when we've again looked into that, there isn't. So the sort of over 100-day length of stay, which is where there was concern. If you looked at the pure numbers, so a couple of weeks ago when we went to that meeting, there were about 50 patients. But actually, only 10 of those patients actually should have had a criteria to be in hospital. The rest were all waiting for packages of care in the community. Of the 10 of that 50 that had a right to be in hospital, 5 of them were actually patients that should have gone home, have now got ill again, or a chest infection or a problem due to sitting in hospital. But there was only 5 of the 50 that actually needed to be in hospital. And when we looked at those, 1 was a major trauma case, 2 had complex tracheostomy care, which would be inpatient for a long, long time. So you're literally talking 1 or 2 out of 50 who still are complex patients. So that this sort of myth that there's a big long length of stay problem is absolutely not correct. So that data we're collecting regularly and looking at it and feeding that back, but it's just in case that comes up at any point. The issue with we've got some regulators who look at purely spreadsheets rather than patients and then say, let's be
That's down to 49 patients now, we're tracking that daily.
I was on a visit last week to medicine and doing infectious diseases and all that, and they were saying it's been the most integrated approach to system patient numbers and flow that they can remember. So it felt at that level, and so when there's a sense of we need one bed, we will find a way of getting that one bed rather than can't do that. And so it's a much more positive story than I've had before.
Thank you, Mike. On the P3 to P1 thing, is it the same person sat in the same bed? Or we just say you're not a P3 anymore, we're calling you a P1 now?
Yes, in essence. So when Newton came in, one of the main things in the diagnostic was that there was a nervousness from our clinicians about, to be honest, the community support and things that were being able to reach into people's homes. So we were over prescribing care, in their words, and putting people into long-term residential or nursing care. So what we're doing now is, and I think it's back to that integrated approach, because we're aware what services there are in community, we're having that link with the social work teams, and the wards aren't prescribing that care themselves. It's an MDT approach. So the social worker will say, oh no, I can put this home service in, whereas previously the nurse on the ward and the doctor would say, right, they're going to have to go to a care home. So it's now getting that visibility of all the services that we're offering can reach to a patient.
I think it's a really good example, again, when we explained it at the NHS meeting. We have this odd situation in Liverpool where that decision will be made in a hospital at best, occasionally with community. And previously the brokerage for that service would be us asking Merseycare to ask the social care teams what the solution is. And the shift in brokerage, that it's us, social care teams having a direct conversation is actually so. That simple change has led to patients being prescribed the right care rather than this old prescription care homes. The talk is almost the same example. It's us asking Merseycare to ask council to find a solution for a discharge today. And if that was just a putting the council MDT type process again, you take out that middle process. I'm not saying it's Merseycare's fault, it's just a situation where we've just got an unnecessary step in a system that's creating it like proven with P3s that our clinicians have got confidence when they're talking to the person who can enact that discharge rather than talking to someone who's then got to ask someone else. And I think the same is true of the top room. So hopefully, if we see that now shift, that'll be a direct conversation. That people can actually do something about it.
Okay, so just running through the Royal Report. So just a couple of key items we discussed. So we went through the site people plan for the year and the 4 themes, and we'll get the updates quarterly through our people and OD committee going forward. And I know Tim will cover the transformation board in detail, but from a Royal perspective, we were assured we've stood up our transformation board. We've got our PIDs and the governance is in place. So for next month, we'd expect a detailed report as part of our HMB report on our work streams. Just picking up on the KPI, so a few to pull out the IPR at the Royal. So you see there's been a positive improvement in the news compliance at 89%, still not where we want to be at the 95% standard, but we're expecting that to improve again next month. There has been some changes on the Royal site where the Band 3s couldn't input directly when they've got the news information. They can now, and that's enabling more timely recording. So we are expecting to meet the 95% in the coming months. The 5th month of achieving the 4AT delirium screening on site, so feeling really consistent performance against that now. And for the first time in a long while, we are compliant with our mandatory training, and that has been some specific discussions with medical staffing, which I know has been through audit committee around low compliance for our medical staff. So positively improving there. From an elective perspective, the Royal Site declared 1 breach in March against the 65-week standard. That patient has now been treated. And we saw positive improvement with a reduction in the patients over 52 weeks. So we're down at 314 patients waiting over 52 weeks. And then from a cancer perspective, we've discussed previously through board the struggles with breast demand and capacity. You can see that has improved in months to 68%. We're expecting further improvements again when we get the March, because that's February in the cancer data. So once we see March, we'd expect that to improve further. And we've also seen, for the history of the IPR, the lowest cancer 62-day backlog reporting that we've had. So 32 patients waiting over 62 days for treatment. So really positive improvements there. From a risk perspective, there were two increased risking scores. So one was the diabetic foot pathway. We have a real issue at the Royal site around the provision for supporting the diabetic foot pathway. A review has been undertaken by someone senior in our corporate nursing team, because there is a different structure on the Aintree site to the Royal site. So we're just looking between the two sites and seeing what we could potentially do if we look at that service overall to try and make sure there's not an inequity for patients across the site. I'm getting that report back next week, and then we'll meet between the sites and look at what can be done to mitigate that. The other increased risk was the level of prescribing errors that are occurring on the emergency floor. So that is within the emergency department and the acute medical unit. A couple of issues there. One is there is an underlying issue around not enough pharmacy support, particularly to the AMU, which we expanded a couple of years ago when we moved into the new hospital. And the second is that two of the senior pharmacists have just left from AMU, so there is a vacancy issue. We've put some immediate cover in place from other areas to support the AMU, and I've just met with the team, and we are doing a reconfiguration within the medical staffing budget and pharmacy to increase the number of pharmacists on the AMUs. That will come to HMB in May, and then I'll expect we can close or reduce that risk. There are two risks that have decreased in months. So we've discussed previously the challenges with gastroenterology and endoscopy and not meeting 6-week standard. You can see in the IPR we're now online with trajectory, and we are in a much better place with endoscopy. So that risk has now reduced, and we are have got the staffing plan agreed around the sustainable staffing model for the Broad Green endoscopy unit. So we've been able to reduce that risk. The other risk that has reduced in month is the IPC and cleaning issues that have been on our risk register a long time. We now successfully recruited and covered the domestic cover across all the wards, 7 till 7. We've had positive place assessment results, and our cleaning standard audits are coming back much more consistently now against the 5-star ratings. So, and I should have said the CDT cases you'll be able to see have been much lower now for a number of months. So we've reduced that risk. There is one new risk in month, which is the diabetic pump service. So this is an evolving risk. There has been a change to NICE guidance around when to put patients on diabetic pumps in community. And we have got some new vacancies in our diabetic consultant team. We have a significantly increased waiting list of patients. It's now nearly 1,000 patients that are waiting to go on this. Again, at first glance, this looks like this is a different service offer across Aintree and the Royal, and there's potentially inequity in waiting lists. So again, we are going to do the same piece of work, looking across the sites around what we could do to mitigate this risk. This risk is brand new to HMB, so it's only been on the risk register a couple of weeks. So next month I should have a better update on what we can do to try and bring that down. The other risks for the Royal relate to ones we've all talked about previously. So there are the UEC risks. We have left the mental health risk at the minute on at 12, largely relating to the emergency department. But I just want to touch on, we have a new SOP in place, and we have new provision now for patients that are staying in the ED overnight in the mental health hub. And we've massively increased the utilisation of the mental health hub through the work we've been doing with Merseycare. So we're seeing real positive improvements on that. The reason the risk is staying is because what we haven't seen is a positive improvement in the length of time patients are waiting to be discharged or transferred. Mandy Nagra has been in touch, and there is a new system oversight meeting going in place for mental health waits in EDs. So if we get some traction on that, I would expect we could start to reduce that risk. And then the final risks relate to finance. So from a Royal perspective, we've ended the year on an £11 million deficit. That was in line with the forecasts really from month 6. And we've achieved 27 million CIP, but against our target of 39.5, of which 21.5 is recurrent. So our biggest challenge is that we are carrying over an £18 million non-recurrent problem into next year's CIP. From a Broad Green perspective, £60,000 overspent overall, but the challenge at Broad Green is that we've achieved 3.6 million CIP against a 4.1 target. but only 1.92 of it is recurrent. So we've got just over 2 million of non-recurrent being carried forward from Broad Green. There's two significant issues in that CIP plan that I've been working through. So one is we were reviewing with it, combining with the Royal, the management structures, and we've now done the HR processes on that. So in month one, we will transact just under £500,000 of vacancy and restructuring savings. And the other is we need confirmation. Obviously, the income plans are just going through at the minute around April. We expect if once we see the recurrent income plan for Broad Green, I'm hoping we can transact some dermatology income recurrently, which is currently non-recurrent in that plan. So the main thing I suppose to highlight for Royal and Broad Green is that we've got a 34.5 million CIP for this year. I know Rob will come on to it when we do the full finance report. As at month one, we're looking at probably having about 13 million of it agreed and being able to transact against the 34. So we're at about 30% of our CIP is identified and will be transacted. The rest of it we can go through when we do the finance report, but that's where the significant focus is for the sites at the minute, is trying to work through the rest of the CIP plans and the milestones for achievement. That's it for one progress.
Yeah, just two ones for me. One was the why was the month 11 finance report limited assurance in the group?
I think it was because of it. So although it's month 11, it was the overarching look at the CIP and the fact we have limited assurance in delivery of the full 34.5. So it was more the five report.
And the second one was just around the we've got a risk of 12 of ineffective streaming in the ED.
Yeah.
Yeah, the CQC report seemed to think so. So it was just a.
It's because at the minute the assessment areas are bedded. So they've put the risk on because the SDEC is bedded and the frailty assessment unit has been bedded on multiple occasions. So
that's gone in.
It's not that the modules don't work, it's an issue at the minute which through our UVC improvement work stream we need to.
So that's why the response is to that with the director of ops chair.
Yes, to stop the bedding of the assessment areas and maximise the effectiveness of it.
What questions, Mike?
Thanks. Well done on the 28-day cancer. Be good to get a sense of where that's going to go medium term when the March figures come through as well with the breast stuff.
Yeah, so when you see the transformation board update, there's work stream within the Royal, which is sustainable services. So there are a number of services where we've seen, haven't we, that we achieve performance, but we do it through short-term actions. Breast is one of them. So it's formally in our transformation plan. So you'll see that updated about long-term workforce structure.
I should have asked this on the ED thing. There's a really marked fall in total attendances, A&E attendances for 2024.
That is St Paul's activity. So historically, St Paul's used to be type 1 activity and total attendance included. We stripped that out at the beginning of April 24. So it's now not included in those attendance.
So that's a new number.
Yeah.
Any other question? Yes, Jackie.
Can I just ask you about the IPR and around the, it's in the summary on the people part of it, and it's got the safe settings. Yeah. So the figures are fine, but the narrative underneath doesn't match the figures. So we should be aiming for 100%. Yeah. 90% is what we're willing to accept if things go the wrong way, but we're talking about deterioration when actually it's coming in the right direction. So it just doesn't add up at all. So it needs.
Indeed, and thank you, Jackie. That is the two sentences in the summary that contradict each other and saying it's going along the plan for us to reduce appropriately what we're seeing that reduction as a deterioration. So we'll correct that narrative.
So please.
I just wanted to pick up on your point on the prescribing errors and the impacts on life of that and the patients. So we should go with an exercise and all. Just wanted to understand the bit of context around the impact.
Yeah, it's going through clinical effectiveness committee next month in detail. We think there's been minimal harm in the prescribing errors, and we think it's actually more. I think this has been a baseline for a long time, but now we've got our site pharmacy leads and the awareness bit. There's been more reporting, so it's flagging more. Not that we've suddenly had a deterioration in it, but the issue with the pharmacy cover, now we've got the 2 vacancies, causes a bigger issue. But there is a detailed report coming to clinical effectiveness next month following HMB around the discussion of what has the impact been on patients. But Mo, who is our site pharmacy lead, updated there was minimal harms. It had been picked up before patients discharged, etc. But there are issues in prescribing at the minute.
I was just going to come on to that. Because we about a year ago we changed the EPMA, the electronic prescribing system. We used to have an issue where the A&E would prescribe something and then it didn't follow through to the AMU, so they might then re-provide it. So putting the electronic system in sort of eradicates what significant potentially with pharmacy errors. This now seems to be more around that sort of staffing challenge around that. So we've sort of eradicated the big problem, but it sounds like the AMUs and the urgent care system in both sites probably hasn't got sufficient pharmacy resource, but also can't afford it. So that's why the sort of different model around using some of the medical budget to move to the pharmacy.
Some of it is will be positive as well in that the medics that are giving the drug, etc., without the necessarily special pharmacy advice, the pharmacist feels we can significantly reduce drug costs if we can get the pharmacists on there because we're not necessarily prescribing them cost-effective way, etc. So it's potentially, hopefully, a financial savings so we can get that right.
And fill in those posts, we don't see an issue.
No, unfortunately, yes, I think we've got some candidates that we expect to come in. I think one of the problems at the minute is because the staffing levels are low, it's not that attractive. But if we go out with the new model, I think it's hopeful we'll be able to recover.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've got terms of reference attachments on each of the site reports today. Are there things that we need to highlight?
No, they're just some amendments that were made via the HMBs. There's nothing, they came out of the effectiveness reviews. There's nothing major in the updates.
Okay, so we're to receive each of those. Okay, but please don't hold back if you David.
Not on the terms of reference, Chair, but just going back to the IPR for the Royal. I realise the new way of monitoring sepsis compliance is still bedding in, but 40% of the patients seen within the time frame feels disappointing.
Yes, we talked it through. We don't believe that is accurate. So there is a sepsis lead allocated to each site. Ours is Kevin McLaughlin. He is going to be reviewing the external data and he's going to be taking it back through clinical effectiveness this month. And then Oliver's going to do a specific sepsis update for HMB next month because we think that has to be a recording issue rather than patients not coming in again. When CQC came in, they mapped a number of sepsis patients and each one received treatment absolutely aligned to national best practice. So we just need to work out what's going on there with that new metric in the IPR. So next month I'll be able to update on that.
Yeah. Can we think about how we avoid a situation where we include numbers in papers, people get seek interpretation and we say, don't worry about that. Well, don't think it's right. So we need to accurately report what comes out of the system. But if there's some sort of marker we can put on it that says we're doing further investigation because this number doesn't feel right, it would be good to have that in the paper.
Sorry, I'm not really very clear there. It may be that is the accurate pull from the data sets we've got. It may be that within the ED, for example, we're not ticking a box that is feeding that, or it might be something more at source within the emergency department. So we're just looking at what's going on.
I think David's point is though, we know that we need to get it in the papers because otherwise
Okay.
read these lines.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we'll review that. It is, as you know, a new metric that we piloted with backlog, and it seems like it's a bit of a struggle to get it accurately. But yeah, we'll make sure that's labelled in the papers, but hopefully we'll be able to resolve whatever the issue is before the next report.
Okay. Thank you. Any more? Yeah. Okay. My point from before was that we'll receive the amendments in terms of reference in the context that Daniel describes, but if you have any questions or concerns about them, please raise them as we go. Thank you. Yes, Daniel.
Can I just ask, I think it might be useful just to, that last bit about sectors, that we just make an action in the board log and that we bring back a response in the chief exec's update next month, because that will cover all areas, just to make sure that we cover it and we can provide evidence back to the board members.
Thank you. Good suggestion. Let's move on to Liverpool Women's, Jenny, please. And there's been a number of questions raised outside the meeting.
There has, and I'll take those at the end if that's okay.
Yes, of
We'll go through the update and take those questions at the end. So as James mentioned, the CQC inspected our maternity services last week. The immediate feedback was good. Really noted the improvements since the last inspections, which is really encouraging for the team. So we're still in the inspection phase, but we do await the outcome, but it was encouraging based on the feedback that we received last week. Moving on to the report, the financial position at Liverpool Women's closed the year with a slight favourable variance, which was encouraging again, and we're currently being audited by Grant Thornton. Similar to Nat's update, in terms of the cost improvement programme, there was £5.9 million delivered, but more than half of that delivery was non-recurrent, which causes us issues moving into 25-26, but I'm sure Rob will pick some of that up later in his report. In terms of performance, we were informed this week that we will be staying in Tier 1 for cancer performance. Just to be clear, Tier 1 is the least best. So sometimes ordering work around, but Tier 1 is the one that suggests we require the most support. And as we mentioned before, the faster diagnosis standard has been continually improving over a good number of months now. The way that we managed to improve that was last year we made a change to the pathways. So ladies were coming in and then being called back for hysteroscopies. We've changed the pathways to get towards more of a one-stop shop where we're doing biopsies on the day. We're able to see ladies and get them through more quickly, which has really made an impact on the time to diagnose, which has been really great for the women, and you can see it in the performance standards as well. Our issue is around 62-day, the 62-day target, and that's where a lady should be treated within 62 days of the referral, and we've been reporting those challenges in meeting that now for some time. The team have been in Tier 1 for over a year now, I think, but generally, in terms of the work that we've been doing, it's been well received by NHS England and the Cheshire and Mersey Alliance, and we're going to continue to work with them in terms of trying to get that performance better. We're going to seek support, or we have sought support from the corporate ops team in terms of how that's moving forward in their performance, and we'll be working with Beth's team to accelerate improvement through the cancer improvement group. In terms of the wider metrics, I won't go through them all, they're in the report, but just to highlight elective recovery, there were no patients waiting over 65 weeks until 12, and the number of patients waiting over 52 weeks reduced to 304 patients. Just to flag never events, you'll recall that we report them in a rolling 12-month period, and that's 2 at the moment, and themes associated with those are around LOCSIP, so our local safety standards for invasive procedures, and those 2 are under review through the medical procedures group. I won't go through any more, I say take questions on those. What I do want to highlight though is the outcome of the Birth Rate Plus report. So Birth Rate Plus is a requirement of the maternity incentive scheme, which we'll talk about later on in the agenda, and that is an indication of what our staffing levels should be in our maternity services, looking at acuity and the way that we are delivering our care. The latest report in March 25 indicated that the current baseline establishments, which you'll recall as well, from a midwifery point of view, we are fully established into that baseline. We require a further 15.23 whole-time equivalents, and that's primarily in clinical specialist roles. So the Hospital Management Board are going through that report now in terms of how we recruit to those posts. We knew that report was coming, and it was included in our planning figures for 25-26. We also discussed how we dealt with the university hospital status that we reported we achieved back in February. We were not going to change the branding or the name as a result of just kind of mechanics and the practicalities and costs of doing that, but rightly so, we got some pushback around, well, you know, people worked really hard to get this status, we should be celebrating that. So we agreed through the Hospital Management Board to use the title of Liverpool Women's University Hospitals because we can, but not necessarily to go through and change all the branding at this point because it wouldn't be sensible to do so, particularly all the changes in the group as well. But we will be using the title just out of interest. Of the 43 that had recently been given that status, only 23 do. 23 have chosen not to formally add the names, so people decide whether they want to do it or not. And yeah, we'll be picking it up. I won't go too much into the CNST and perinatal dashboard because we've got that later on the agenda. There was one stillbirth reported, and I just want to confirm, if you look in the IPR, the number of stillbirths and the perinatal dashboard, you'll see that they are different. And they're not normally that significantly different. So we went down into patient level on those. There were 6 stillbirths, one of which was a stillbirth as per the definition for the perinatal dashboard, and the other 5 were terminations. So that's why you see such a spike in the stillbirths in the IPR compared to the adjusted figure in the perinatal dashboard. And I know sometimes that comes up because the figures are reported differently. We achieved 1-to-1 care in labour of 100% in March 25, which is brilliant. And the delays in IOLs and inductions of labour are continuing to go down. 35 with no harm identified. Like for the Royal and Broad Green, we took our transformation board update through. So we closed down the 24-25 improvement plan in the improvement board, which was really quite encouraging to see some of the outcomes of that. And I'm sure Tim will go through those later. And we articulated the areas for the transformation plan 25-26 moving forward, which I'm sure we'll pick up later. We received and approved 2 business cases, the digital nurse, midwife and allied health professionals, which in essence didn't make a lot of change for us, but was something that was happening across the group because we've already got a lot of those posts in. And the key one was around pharmacy and medicines management. You'll see a risk on our risk register around this, and the original business case needed some work in terms of the affordability and what we could prioritise. That was approved, and we'll get going with that. Hopefully we'll start to see those risks reduce as a result of implementing the actions in that case. In terms of the risks, there have been no changes to the pharmacy and finance scores post-review. But as I say, hopefully we'll see the pharmacy medicine management one come down. We did note with the finance one that whilst the risk score was high, that the controls in place at Liverpool Women's Hospital were good. It was the external factors that we were struggling with, and we also I reported this last month, but formally reduced the anaesthetic rota now that the anaesthetic rota is more robust. Just to note, we have got an emerging risk in imaging capacity, which we're seeing coming through, but we'll report that should that be escalated. Well, in terms of reference that we've covered off. So I'll pause there, taking questions on the report before I go into the question from them.
Yeah, got James first, then Tom, and Jeffrey.
2 for me. So, first one, I appreciate the pharmacy risks and the need to deal with that. Equally, we're obviously putting forward a plan that's a less position. So, how have we mitigated the ability to make that investment? They haven't got the money to pay for it.
So, when we started with the improvement plan last year, you'll remember there was a 3 million investment in relation to that based on the highest risks on the site.
Yeah.
We've reviewed where those risks sit and what's been mitigated and where those highest risks remain, and flipped out some of the work around the improvement plan because we've mitigated the risks already, such as the anaesthetic rota and things like that, and flipped some of that into the pharmacy risk because that was escalated.
So basically, one push the program. And the cancer, I just think it's troubling in a sense that we're still in tier 1 because we've seen a really good improvement in the faster diagnosis standard. And if we look at the charts in the IPR, 5 points going upwards, usually that translates to improvement in pathway. It isn't. So we're sort of 29% for the last year and now 31. So there is some improvement above the mean, but it's still not moving in the right direction. I think the board could do with, even if it's a one-off in next month's report, a better understanding of, what is the underlying issue with this, because we've had the years to improve it. It's got marginally better. Yeah. But if you look at the axis on the left side of that, we're talking 30%, aren't we? We're not seeing the leap we would expect. And some sense of the volume, because this probably isn't hundreds and hundreds of patients either. So I think if we could just next time in the report pick out what do we think are the key things that are preventing that improvement, and how many patients are we actually talking about being between the 30% and where we should be. That's all right. Thank you.
And on that, Jane, I agree. If we could then have work's going on with testing or whatever, this is what the problem is. These are the solutions. This is the trajectory going forward. The tier one thing's a big problem for us. Disappointed that we're still there at this time.
Some of it is dependent on external as well, in terms of the late referrals, which we're trying to deal with, but there's still an awful lot.
Tom next, please.
Thank you, David. It's great to see the anesthetic risk come down from 10 to 13, but I just wanted to ask about the sustainability of it, because the words refer to using a locum to cover third rotation. Using a locum never sounds quite sustainable to me in the long term.
Yeah. So they had the discussions with the clinical effectiveness group as well, and they were happy to split out the risk in terms of multifactorial elements of that. They were happy in terms of well, at the moment, being filmed. Appreciate we've open in that at the moment, but we've got part of our transformation plan, the work to work across Royal and Aintree jointly on the anaesthetic rotors to make sure that they're as robust as they can be. So even for now, with even more improvement. So the risk is still there, it's just lower.
Jeffrey.
James, that's part of my question on the pharmacy. But you know, dream it, we're going to recruit a chief pharmacist for the group. I dreamt that.
We've got yes. So we've got a chief pharmacist for the current group. Two organisations that was, yeah, good for she's chief pharmacist.
I just wonder what the impact then in terms of obviously there's been issues at DD and the Royal, and the issues then. Is there another type of leadership in terms of the group?
Yeah,
chief pharmacist.
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the reasons we keep £2 business case, just because we've got a chief pharmacist who's required.
Oh, yeah.
Taken the view and said, look, and to be fair, you can evidence-base it that Liverpool has absolutely not invested in pharmacy services and bed management services for the last decade by the looks of it, because we are miles behind. Now, in every sort of sense of investment in that area, reduces reliance on expensive medical costs, reduces overall drug costs, but it's that thing of, we're still sitting here with deficit positions unable to make investments. So we've been trying to balance it over the last few years. We put, I think it was about 2 and a bit million into pharmacy over the last 18 months or so across. This investment that Jenny's made has sort of switched out other priorities. We were like, Watson and Clatterbridge also come to us and say, hang on, your chief pharmacist keeps asking us now for a business case for this as well. So the sooner we get that picture of the group, the better. What's really frustrating is when you look at our chest, which obviously we're now in, we will be unable to have a single pharmacy service across the group until 2037, based on the current IPR rollout, because of the way the digital systems operate within Liverpool Heart Chest and the rest of the group. So a problem for that to try and decipher there. But you look at the Broadgreen and Heart and Chest example, we've got 2 pharmacy services, and you've either got to take the Heart and Chest off the level 7 HIMSS EPR and join our bits and pieces that we've got before you can make that. So there'll still be this issue of some of the digital challenges, but 4 hours supply for us could quite easily move to.
Well, there's a payback as well that Matthew referred to earlier in terms of reducing medicine's costs.
Yeah,
with good clinical leadership.
Yeah, and we've seen some of that through the programme for UHL last year in terms of drug cost reduction, oxygen prescribing.
And perhaps in a future report you can highlight that.
Yeah, well, it will come through our CIP.
Yeah.
So we've got drug cost savings as part of our CIP plans. There's already something like 1.5 million inside.
That tells how you're going to do better than 2037.
I thought you meant 2027 then. There are a couple of things that we're making improvements on in the meantime. One is we're consolidating our stock management system in pharmacy, so we can do that without an EPR. That's one of our priorities, and that will have real benefits. And then the other thing that we've developed is a really robust medicine dashboard. We had a national visit, and they sort of commented on good practice, and that has really good oversight around missed doses, and that's been applied across the rest of the group. So that will have real positive impact, I think. So there are things that we are working on as well as EPR.
Yeah, not about pharmacy. The question's finished on pharmacy. I just wanted to ask the IPR shows that staffing levels on neonatal aren't where we'd like them to need to take action on it. Can you tell us what those actions are? We're going to mitigate that in the meantime.
Yeah, so this is the average fill rates which is quite an arbitrary definition that's reported through the IPR. It's a standard definition. There are no concerns in neonates around staffing levels. What happens is we flex based on the acuity of the cots. So staffing ratios change based on how many, so which tier they're in. Basically, more intensive babies need one-to-one care. The Scooby babies are 1-4. So it's really difficult when you're looking at those ratios to take a really, it's a very blunt tool. We have other ways of measuring, which is reviewing the rotas and looking at the acuity. We've got safe staffing reports that come in, and they are more informative than the pure data of staffing rates.
Think about how it's reported then, because it reports that we need to take action.
Yeah.
What you're suggesting is that we don't. So, thank you.
Okay.
Questions, yes. Okay, so I'll take the first three together, which came in together, which were around in the light of the HSJ article and the RCM statement on the government announcement to allow ICBs to use maternity along with children's health and mental health funding to balance ICB books. What are the implications for Liverpool Women's Hospital budget and for safe staffing? And then just added on to that, it was noted that as the largest maternity hospital, Liverpool Women's already suffers from an inadequate maternity tariff. Insufficient maternity funding and staffing is driving the closure of maternity units in England and reorganisation of LWH. And then the third part of that was the RCM have described budget cuts to ring fence maternity from 95 to 2 million shocking. Says this will compromise moves to improve maternity safety following Donna Ockham's reports. So the first bit, hopefully you've heard me articulate what we're doing around safe staffing in terms of the budgets that we've got and the plans that we've got. We did receive a very small reduction in funding for Ockhamden, 100k in 25-26, but we did get an additional £1 million worth of income to support the NST. So we've not felt that in our plan so far, but as I say, we respond to the safe staffing levels and guidance that's put to us. I won't go through a response to all of the elements around the comments about funding and staffing. We've prepared a written response for that, which I can share, but we recognise that tariff is an incidentally and that CNST is an issue for us as well, and we continue to lobby for that. I've reported before that we did see an increase in the tariff by 11% in 25-26, but that wasn't sufficient to cover all the developments we've seen, violence through Ockhamden and etc. So that. The next three questions that came in quite late yesterday, so we've not had a chance to really look at, were around. So please tell me during which times of the day and week scanning is available for problems in pregnancy. How many pregnancy diagnoses have been delayed by the lack of scanning? How often has scanning been delayed by staff shortages, unfilled vacancies and staff absence? And how many women have been denied a scan when they have asked for one because they were concerned? So I'll take the first one around times during the day and week scanning is available. And that depends on clinical presentation for those ladies, 18 weeks. For ladies, 18 weeks plus, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week scanning is available. In terms of the data on the other questions, we'll have to take that away if we can get it at all. So we'll respond separately to that.
Okay, thank you. And as on process, Dan, where we published the question and the answer.
So the answers that Jenny's read out, they've published as part of the board pack. The other questions that only came in yesterday will be publishing them on the website once we've been able to answer them. We have a process where we ask members of the public for any questions to have 3 working days notice in advance of the board meeting. So we've met the target for publishing that information.
Okay, thank you. Right, let's move on. Jenny, please.
Chair. So I'll start with the risks. So for the entry site, there's currently 9 risks, scoring 12 or more. That's a reduction in 3 from the previous month. We've got 1 risk that scores 13 currently, which is risk 6425, regarding complex discharge, which you'll note in the papers is also linked to risks 6457 and 8247, all of which I think link and relate to the UEC updates that Matt's provided earlier. We've got one new risk this month, 7458, which is around allied health professional support to the spinal assessment service. In terms of the actions currently being taken to mitigate that risk, so we are recruiting to the vacancies that we've got within the service currently, and the medical directors from both the Aintree site and the Walton Centre are currently meeting as part of the last clinical reference group to review spinal pathways between the two sites. 4 risks have reduced in month, and just to note, I think we had a long-standing risk 7032 around the critical care capacity. So some of the actions being taken that have supported a reduction in that risk have been the Cheshire and Merseyside review, and also a loft internal review, which I think is being led by Jim Varnell. In terms of the key points to note, so Nat's already picked up much of the urgent care, but just to note that the metrics are currently within normal cause variation. We do require further work to take place with NWAS around improvement for handover times, but we've agreed a SOP this month around use of our surge areas and an updated patient flow policy as well, which should support addressing those actions. Friends and family test remains above trajectory, so there is focus for further development around the assessment areas and particular wards which have pressures. The challenge remains around complex discharge and new criteria to reside patients. That's already touched on the number of P3 patients continues to reduce, but that's flipping to the increase in P1s, which is causing pressure on the site. For elective care, we've been seeing improvements in faster diagnosis and the 2-week wait for cancer pathways. We're continuing with work within head and neck, and there were some actions I think reported last month to board to address some improvements in that area. One was around the loss of the registrar clinic and the termination of some clinics within the Northwest region. Both of those actions have now been implemented, so we expect to see further improvements there. With regards to the 65-week wait position, we ended the year in a good position, I think as referenced earlier, but there are a number of factors which we expect to cause a deterioration in position for this month. So it's just to flag that with the board. We are taking some action, so further validation with Beth's team and the central team to address that, and a real focus on the site around the sort of sustainability of the services, so particularly within ENT, a focus on productivity and workforce plan in that area. With regards to the HMB meeting itself, we received an assurance paper around MRSA bacteremia. So this is the second paper now that the board's received. We were assured this month that we've received a key action plan to address those issues. So the issues were particularly around IV access, and the actions that are being implemented are issuing of IV grab packs, IV training and vessel protection tools. The plan will be monitored through our quality and safety committee or group at site, I should say. But we have asked for an update back to HMB for further assurance in 3 months' time. Probably the other point to note is around the EPR implementation within critical care. So we received an update from the board that implementation is expected and planned during June. Gateways for that being led by colleagues within the digital team, but they're working alongside the surgical leadership team. So we've got assurance that they're working together to address the successful implementation. And then if I just move on to finance.
Yes.
Yeah. So overall position at the end of month 12, we were overspent by 1.8 million, with a year-to-date position of 5.8 million overspent. Income at month 12 was 1 million better than plan, with a year-to-date position of 11.8 million better than plan. Pay, month 12, 2 million overspent, and year-to-date 11.4 million overspent, really due to a combination of factors that have previously been reported, very much linked to our escalation areas, undelivered CIP, vacancies and sickness. And then in terms of the CIP position, we delivered 29.1 million, I should say, delivered at month 12 against a target of 37.7 million. For month one, we expect we'll deliver the CIP target for month one in this year. And we have 10 million recurrent identified so far for this year.
One question. Thank you. I think it's probably appropriate that I bring in the issue about pressure ulcers. So colleagues will recall that this time at our meeting last, Pete mentioned the increase of the continued increase in pressure ulcers on the entry site. Part of the reason for that obviously was around the earlier observation of tissue damage. And the absence of the tissue viability team. There was a number of those colleagues that were off work on ill health. They've now returned. We've done some work with the matrons on that site, and that's learning around how we can build up a greater collaborative approach. So it's not just down to the tissue viability team to go through the early warning of tissue damage and how we can work within wards. And we can see that there has been, I'm not saying that the 1 month changes, it is the thing to celebrate, but we can see that there has been a small change for the positive in this last month's report. I think this is the area that we knew last month was contributing to the overall trust performance in pressure damage.
Thanks, David. James, is it on that point?
No.
Go by. Thanks.
Thanks, Jane. This may be more for Tim, and maybe later in the agenda, if possible. Maybe. So A&E performance in entry hasn't shifted for 2 years, really. It's just been static. And in terms of the performance standard, must be one of our big vulnerabilities. I know that we're going to do more work on that, but it must be a big vulnerability. So the question is, from a board point of view, from a government point of view, how do we gauge whether we're making sufficiently rapid progress in here? I just got an anxiety that this will be, we have a plan, the plan's coming, blah, 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 blah. And 6 months in, we haven't really seen significant change. How do we get that balance between discipline around a key performance statement and not overscrew or sort of saying, I want results now when actually there's a plan that's mature?
I think we need to split standards in two. So 4 hours, I think it's down to grip and control and performance of the department. It's a lot of those patients don't get admitted, so aren't reliant on bed availability in the hospital. So my stance to the director's box has been, you need to hit that standard and you need to put the weekly oversight in, you need to get that with the team. So I think 4 hours, Pete and I will be on that with the teams and we expect delivery, and that should be quickly. 12 hours, I think, is a more complex issue because generally the patients are waiting over 12 hours are waiting to get admitted onto the wards, and that couldn't, they're not meeting criteria to be there. And that I think will need to link to our de-escalation plan and our P1 improvement. So I think we need to just split the two standards. I think 4 hours we need to coming back with quick improvement and hitting it. 12 hours still need to link to the P2 plan. Does that make sense?
It does, but I still don't know. So where are we in July? Where are we in September? So in terms of us understanding now, right, this is a deep-rooted problem that's going to require sustained performance improvement, or this actually is a focused quick fix area. I just think we need to know what it's going to look like at any given point. And I don't know the answer to that for the moment. All we've got is consistent.
So we've got a monthly trajectory that we submit to the national team of where we'll hit it. And Steve in the performance team, Steve Carroll, is currently modelling how many breed reductions we need per month to get us the answer to that. So when you can expect us to hit that. So, and that's where I think we can do it. I think it should be, but we'll have a monthly.
Where do we see that? Is that in stuff? Is that in Denny's back?
Firstly, it's inextricably linked to criteria to resign as well. So that's right. There's people in the 4 hours that are not admitted. About 70% of people who are not admitted. You only need to look at the chart if you go back. The significant deterioration below in both departments is absolutely linked to how many people are stuck in hospital. So the P1 issue and the TOC issue will definitely, if we resolve it, reduce the bed numbers, smooth flow in the departments, that might something, and then better grip and control on those that are the non-admitted ones, as Nat said. I'd love to continue to start making up arbitrary sort of trajectories in a plan But then everybody says, well, that didn't happen because there's an element of crystal ball gazing and multi-partner stuff here. Every time we do that, we take on the responsibility for the delivery of something. Somebody outside of our walls and our decision-making ability has total control over, and we don't. And then when it doesn't get hit, we end up in a position where we're in a tiering system as a result. But I do totally agree with your point, Michael, where you see it. So I think it still feels to me like we put in the action log at the beginning of the meeting that there is a need for us to sit down and go through what do we think the modelling says about all of the performance targets that we've got in the operating plan this year. There's not that many, there's only 8 of them, I think, 9 of them. And what we want to do is do a sort of one-off session with the board and make this right. 1% of the weighting, that's what would that need by when for that to happen? Same with EED standards, and I think we should do that. Now, we can't do it next week. I know we can do it back in our strategy session, but I do think we need a sort of maybe one-off or even half an hour before the next board meeting or something, or afterwards, where we just take everybody through the planning assumptions for each of those standards. But I'm nervous about taking planning assumptions into operational targets and then being sick about them when all parts of the system don't deliver what they need to help that make sense.
Yes, thank you. It's a good suggestion. Jackie.
If I can follow up on David's comments before that, pressure ulcers, and it's around the MRSA action plan, because I'm just wondering where the continual improvement is in here, because it sounds like you've had to go back to some pretty basics here to put the fundamentals back in place. So what I'm not seeing from here is how are you going to be assured that things are going to be kept up to date, staff are working in the right way, and that best practice is being followed.
I think that come through the quality and safety group at site, led by Jen Taylor, the director, and they're focusing on that with them. I think you've basically has gone back to basics, but I suppose that's the start. There's an element of
On this, you've got Natalie and David.
Just on the pressure ulcers, what they 2 site directors and nurses have formed a joint group, an oversight group, to take the one looking at where we've had grade 3 or 4 pressure ulcers and lessons learned from it, but also a monthly group to keep that oversight and that improvement and engaging all the wards in it to keep that continuous improvement. So, for example, where they, I think there was an area of best practice identified at the Royal, they presented that for some of the entry teams this month. So that's one of the aims, to try and keep the continual improvement going. The only thing I would say on pressure ulcers with the rate, there will be a new risk coming up on the Royal next month, is because of there is an issue with palliative care provision at the minute, particularly for the Royal patients. Some of the pressure ulcers are occurring in end of life patients, that there's difficulty moving, or the families don't want us to move, etc. That has contributed to some of the pressure ulcer issues. So that'll be a new risk on the risk register next month. But again, I'm linking with the ICB around a palliative care database for the Royal, but it is an issue.
David.
Thank you. Again, some very similar issues. In relation to the infection prevention issue of the MRSA, a new IPC lead nurse is starting on the 2nd of June, and he's keen to work in a very similar way that Nat's mentioned with the 2 site directors of nursing, so that we can do that collaborative approach for continuous improvement. And that's a method he's been using in his current organisation.
Thank you. James, then.
It was just obviously given Jen's here as well. For her to hear it first time rather than Pete pass it on, but I just wanted to reflect on, because last year, the people in the cases in the countryside and stuff at Aintree have been really massively increased. And if you look at year on year, now the last 2 years, that staff retention, people leaving within a year has dropped massively. The training, the mandatory training compliance, the appraisals are all really strongly sustained now. And we're also seeing fill rates being managed properly, and all of these things that we were worried about, particularly from a cultural perspective, it was almost that you do it and then it lasts a week and then it stops. It's really been properly maintained in the last year, and I just thought that deserves a bit of credit, because if you go back, that's always been our issue with the entry sites. It's hard to make these things stick. So I feel like if I look at those things, even the sickness absence has come down year over year. That grip and management of the things that we are important from a culture perspective. I mean, it's even interesting, isn't it, that the A&E performance hasn't changed, but the funds and family testing improvement is significant in the last year as well. People find it without service. So
I think we should congratulate the team on being silent on the culture. That is definitely improved. From Jenny.
Yeah, I'm just commenting on the building a kind of safer loft, which is my question possibly towards Nat, but it's great that that you know you've looked at that when your HMB and you've got this is a group of people, a multi-professional group of people who are trying to reduce violence for our staff. The reason I mention it is I did do a war safety walk around this week into one of Nat's wards.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest issues for them was, patients with dementia and delirium and violence that they experience on that ward. And I suppose it's a question of, it's great to see it here, but I'm not sure what's happening in other areas, parts of the organisation.
So it's a lot of kind of safer is across all sides. So David is the professional lead on it with Stuart Crowe. So we're fully engaged. We'll have just gone through HMB at Aintree this month, but it's exactly the same.
Okay, so I suppose it's whether the wider, but we're seeing it in one report, but we're not seeing updates from others.
I think we'll pick it up under the item later on the violence prevention reduction standards paper. So we can test a bit of that. Particularly, one of my comments without spoiling later is that we talk about the loft, but we don't hear about the roof. So I think I'll comment on that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Last week on the Today program, the president of the Royal College of Emergency Medicine was on, being interviewed, and he spoke about the obsession of the NHS of the 4-hour targets and not enough emphasis on the 12-hour targets, because that has a greater deterioration effect on the patient.
Yeah.
And I think it links into Natalie's point before about the MDT approach, working together to get people out. Whereas often the sort of knee-jerk reaction is, let's get people in a care home. That's not what actually they need. So I think to emphasise that joint work, and as your point earlier, James, that's almost cutting out the middleman to work with a local authority or work with whoever to actually speed that flow through. And often that begins on a mission. You start that process on a mission. But there's interesting debate, and actually the interview on the day did pick that up with Wes Streeting in the interview afterwards. He said he would do, but he didn't. And I thought that was a really interesting point, because you can be driven by the target. Actually, the wrong thing to do.
Thank you. Okay. All good, Jenny. Thank you very much. Now, as James took up last time, we've got the new Diagnostic Treatment Centre Management Board. It encompasses LCL, which we've had before, but other things besides. So,
thank you, Chair. So James referenced this in the CEO report. ETC, for people who don't know, was created to support the delivery of one of the group's 3 strategic objectives, which we've set out. One of them being the faster diagnosis of patients and return for care to the community. So it brings together the 3 services James mentioned before, that being imaging, laboratories and also pharmacy. And we held our first meeting on the 1st of May. And we covered a range of issues, receiving reports from each of the 3 services, obviously covering the risks, operational, financial performance, quality and safety and workforce. So across all the 4 areas I've just referenced, there's only one 12, risk rated 12, and that is pertaining to the potential for strike action in LCL. And that officially has been we've been notified of that on the 22nd, 23rd and 27th of May. There have been several meetings to understand the issues that staff are experiencing, particularly in microbiology. And I have met personally with the regional representative for Unite this week. Gosh, it's been a long week. So this week, and it's agreed that I will meet with the 3 local reps for microbiology, and I have arranged that meeting for Monday. The aim of that meeting is for me to listen, understand the issues that they have, and also to understand what issues remain, because I know that actions have been taken to date. And some of those actions, I've just summarised 3 of them. We are proceeding with further recruitment of staff, both qualified and unqualified in microbiology. Number 2, we have Rob commissioned an external review to benchmark our services against some other labs, and we have had 1 meeting with the final report to be received hopefully by tomorrow. And the 3rd one is we have developed strategic plans to address their concerns around the environment in which they are working, and basically when the building was built, it didn't allow for growth and expansion of service, which we have seen in terms of demand. So that is also underway. So I need to understand in terms of the actions taken, as I say, what issues. The outcome of the meetings will obviously influence whether strike action will take place in May or not, and obviously that will increase or decrease the risk in that area. So it was our first meeting. It went extremely well. I think there were some people who might have been a bit nervous that they had stood alone, and now they are part of one. But actually, it's been a very positive feeling, and they are now feeling part of the team. So that's really good. Here is a focus, just to pull out 4. I need to focus on a more rigorous assessment of performance and delivery. We have no performance dashboard at all in pharmacy. We need to get that sorted out, and also turnaround times in LCL. We need to focus on productivity and efficiency, and to get more scrutiny over what's happening in the improvement board, and we need to make sure we give that sufficient focus. Thirdly, to deliver the financial objectives and to address some cost pressures which have been identified. There's quite a large sum identified in pharmacy as a cost pressure. And the 4th is to address the environmental issues being in labs, phlebotomy, and also in the septic units, which is something new that we've identified at the entry site. That was all I was going to pull out of the report for today, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, James.
Yeah, so and it's really helpful to get this group of services together, because of the sort of peculiarity, if you like, of the way that Luft operated in its divisional structures, particularly radiology and pharmacy. I mean, well managed, no problems, but were sort of buried within the Aintree site. So from a board perspective, it's very difficult to see what was going on around times of radiology, because that would get to the Aintree board, but not necessarily this one. So I think bringing this out, these 3 things together, if we look at it from all aspects really, in terms of modernisation of the way that we do things, we've talked about examples around medicines and reconciliation, savings that can be made there. In terms of the future model around faster diagnosis, these 3 services are really important, and bringing them together and getting better visibility of the board is really helpful. In terms of the performance dashboard, or the IPR effectively, Beth, for this grouping of services, when is that likely to be featuring in terms of the board pack?
We left it with Matt, somebody from your team attended, and George Barnwell. They're going to be working together. So the answer to that, I don't know. It's how readily available the information is to populate that IPR. Obviously, it's there for LCL, but it's the other services.
It's another 2037 job. It's probably related to the IPR in some ways, my question. But you can see sort of the year-end financial figure, statements around underspending on radiology and pharmacy, particularly around staff. And do we have an underlying, I don't say we need IPR, please, but do we have an underlying root cause? For example, these type of roles, technical, scientific type roles are difficult to recruit to. We know that, so there's no actual shortages, and therefore we've got a workforce plan around that, for example. So it'd be good to understand a little bit more around why we've got some of those underspends in those areas.
Good for me to get but in answer to your question, the work I've done so far, yes, LCL have only yesterday at the vacancy panel but I have approved some posts, and that is actually changing the skill mix where we failed to recruit. And the next question is, have people at the front line prove that? And we're not just doing that. And they said, yes, absolutely, fully support. So I think that the staff in each of the areas are proposing that we change the skill mix rather than us making those decisions. So there are some areas which naturally are hard to recruit to, but we are looking at the options and how we can support the service rather than have no person at all. I also, Bob will know this, that they've got quite a extensive training programme in LCL to grow their own. And so sometimes as well, the whole posts, so people who are finishing the end of their training go into those posts as well. So yeah, work in progress, but they all do have workforce plans as well.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points, just noting following on from that, I think it was a good financial performance at the end of the year, just 700,000 for LCLA. I note that because Jackie challenged me about 3 or 4 months ago, when I think we were around about £400,000 to improve that. So that was really pleasing. It was more a point on the potential strike action without preempting the report, the commission, the original, the verbal feedback we've had is not only do they not think we're understaffed, but comparatively compared to a service of similar size doing slightly more activity, that probably operate specific areas probably 3 times less, so a third of the stuff. So needs to be detailed out. No, if you're the comparative side. So in other words, they think we are, without putting a cat among the pigeons with their service, but they would say, well, we've got significantly less than that. So how can that be right? Now there will be nuances, and the report will go into that. But I think it is just worth noting if we head towards potential industrial action. The initial big purpose.
So we've commissioned a review of our service that's going to end up in a business case for theirs.
Well, I hope not. I don't think that's the
that is going to happen.
Yeah.
And soon, please.
That's different response one.
I just want to say we just have to be mindful that we haven't received the final report, and Rob's right, but the nuances, for example, are there are differences in automation as well, which can affect staffing levels, etc., etc. So we're just going to work that through, as I say, before we receive the final report. Thank you.
My questions around the environmental issues you've highlighted. What do you see as to some of the potential solutions to that with the point 4 to service being successful?
Yeah. So Andrew Bamber and team have been looking at the options of moving some of the pathology services off-site, and there's been a facility that Rob has been working with Andrew. We've been helping him with the costing. It will come here as a business case. It has to go through the HMB. It wasn't ready for this one, but I think he's hoping it will. Well, he's aiming for it to be at the next HMB. So that will then create some capacity for on-site for services to expand and to increase that automation. There are some services still that are not as automated as they could be, but it's an off-site facility. That's what I'm hoping.
Thank you.
Yeah. But obviously, the challenge has been for it to be cost neutral. Is that right?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Right. We've got to the point in the agenda says comfort break for 15 minutes. We're running well on time.
The paper in front of you today is a slightly more detailed paper than we normally get. It recognises, as David said, the work that's gone on in 24-25 in both the Loft Improvement Plan and the Women's Improvement Plan, and sets out progress against original objectives. The objectives that were detailed in the paper for Loft, there was 3 objectives for phase 2 of the improvement plan. One was to progress towards segment 2 of the NHS oversight framework. The second was to set the longer term corporate strategy for Luft, and the third was to continue to maintain and enhance improvements in the first phase of the improvement plan. And within Liverpool Women's, it was focused on embedding the improvement plan and TDU methodology, and also making progress with the longer term issues around the negatively isolated site, patient deterioration, not having blood transfusion capability on site. The paper works through progress against each of the programmes in some detail. There are some formatting issues in the paper as it's gone into the pack, so we'll make sure the original paper is available on our admin control after the meeting. I'll take it as read, so I'm not going to draw out the progress in any great detail. The paper also talks to the last system oversight group meeting that was held at the end of April, which noted the progress made across both of the organisations. There was another SOG meeting that was planned for May that's been stood down, and the ICB will be writing to both trusts to recognise the progress made. There is then the question of where the trusts will map in the new oversight framework that's being created that has 5 segments that's out for consultation at the moment. We will await confirmation of that from the regional team in due course. In terms of the highlights that I'd pull out, looking at Luft first, I think it's right, Mike, that you raised the question around, are we seeing progress or not? And are we seeing progress quickly enough? The improvement plan isn't intended to replicate operational management. I think it's right, as Nat says, that focus on things like the 4-hour target are led by the operational teams that are accountable for them. The improvement plan has been trying to move forward the things that we think will, in the longer term, move the dials. They are things like transfer of care hub. They are things like the brokerage function, which are happening. And the thing that gives me confidence for next year is the work that's gone on data. So, this year we now have a transfer of care hub referrals dashboard, which we didn't have. That is, it's really, we can see that in our live report that has patient itemised data for every patient on transfer of care hub, their reasons for being referred, and any outstanding actions to delay. And we didn't have that, and that's being used on a daily basis. There is also, which is really exciting, a whole system operational performance dashboard, which is going to look at things like capacity we need to move the needle on P1s, where we need to change on whether it's intermediate bed capacity, whether it's care home capacity, and then looking at our own bed utilisation as well. And that's absolutely best practice for what a system should have. That is coming in, and that's the draft of that is in development. On things like people and culture, we've continued in Luft to drive significant savings. There's over 30 million of workforce related savings LP programme, and then significant cost avoidance on bank and agency spend, and the medicines progress, which was noted by the SOG around things like controlled drug monitoring, drug store and medicine storage, oxygen prescribing, as James drawn out, missed and delayed antibiotic doses have reduced as well. And on ops performance, which is probably the final pillar I'd pull out with Luft, there was a real focus driven by the hospitals and better team on things like theatre utilisation, clinic utilisation. You can see in the metrics progress there too. In the women's, I was in year 1 of the improvement plan. You can see the report speaks to things like improvements in the early warning scores for both news and Muse, 24/7 obstetric cover going into November, appointments made for ACPs. There have been delays in getting the blood transfusion robot on site, but that procurement has now been stabilised, and we're expecting that to come in later this year. Similarly, James has mentioned the faster diagnosis standard, where we're seeing sort of 4 months above the mean. We gloss over the fact that actually in year we've put the improvement. We've also in 24-25 put in a new governance and assurance framework, and Jen is now around the group table, all of that transition, in my opinion, has been handled incredibly smoothly. So the paper draws out highlights across the programmes. Happy to take any questions on those. The next steps for the improvement plan, as we've trailed in previous meetings, we're now trying to push it to really devolved hospital-based accountability for improvement. And as Natalie and others have said, each of the hospital sites has a pillar within the group transformation plan. From next month, we'll be reporting on those in the same format that you've been used to seeing through the improvement plan in previous reporting periods. And we will also be seeing more on progress on the group transformation plan through the strategy and partnerships committee. And I'll be bringing a quarterly paper on the delivery assurance, we think starting from the July board meeting. So I wasn't going to go into any more detail on that, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chair. I said to James earlier, I think it's a really, really good report. The structure, the format, the whole way it's set out and the content, it's really, but just coming together like this at board as we rightly focus all the risk and assurance stuff through the sides. It's a really good for the clubs often work, as you say, in the development. Brings it all together. I'm very pleased with this. All the points, questions. Sorry, Dan.
The only other thing I was going to add, at yesterday's audit committee for Liverpool Women's, we received a copy of the internal audit report into the process for the improvement plan within Liverpool Women's. Obviously, that provided moderate assurance. Obviously, there's a number of recommendations that I know are being picked up by the transformation delivery unit, but I think overall it was positive to say how the process had been operated from an internal audit perspective as well.
Thank you. Everyone content? Thank you very much. UHL Group Finance, take a look. Well, Rob.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I will take the paper as read, but I'll pull out some personal points. I think it's fair to say it's been a challenging financial environment in the year just gone. Undoubtedly will continue to be in the year ahead. For a little bit of context, Cheshire and Merseyside ended the year with a 51.3 million deficit after deficit funding of 50 million. So that shows the kind of system we're working in and the challenge across the board. All these numbers are subject to audit that is obviously ongoing at the moment. In terms of Luft, we ended the year with a 38.3 million deficit versus plan of 32.8. Variance of 5.5 million, which just again to put that in context, is about 0.4 of a percentage point of turnover. But nevertheless, not where we want to be. Liverpool Women's achieved 11.5 million deficit, as we've heard, which is actually 100,000 above plan. So combined, just below 50 million, 49.8 million deficit for the two organisations versus 44.4 million plan, a variance of £5.44 million, which is about 2.8% of income, and the variance is 0.3 of a percentage point of turnover. Just to add a little bit of flavour as well, in terms of LASP, obviously, if we added the other three organisations, the last group would have achieved a £28.4 million deficit versus a combined £24.1 million plan, so a variance of £4.3 million across the five organisations. In terms of CIP, which is obviously a key factor in the performance, again, we should recognise that significant values have been achieved in both organisations. £99.5 million in Luft, £5.9 million in Liverpool Women's, albeit the issue that has been raised by colleagues and the site of recurrency is a real important one. So the full year effect at Luft is £73.7 million versus a target of 114.7 and 2.4. To target of 5.9. The reason that is so important, and we talk about it so often, is that then just rolls over into the next year, and our underlying position continues to stagnate. So it adds another burden for us every year. So that's a real challenge going forward. The report calls out the capital we've spent, and I think this is important to note that we are still spending significant amounts of money on upgrading the estate. So £75.5 million was spent in year at Luft and £10.6 million at Liverpool Women's. Slight shortfall against plan at Luft was again good work across the group, where we shared some CDL with the Walton Centre as part of our collaboration arrangements. That was good. Cash has been another concern during the year. We ended the year with £30.4 million at Luft and £3.8 million at Liverpool Women's, recognising though that we did receive cash support through the year, £30 million at Luft, £7 million at Liverpool. And the cash restrictions from the central team are only going to get harder. In fact, the prompt is that they will be really, really hard to come by. So cash will, to coin the phrase, become king again, I think. So just drawing out some key issues. Again, recognising the work in delivering the CIP, lots of really good work gone on. But again, we'll talk about the plan later on in the next section of the meeting. But the challenge remains as tough in the year to come, and that point about the recurrency is really important. No criteria to reside. We've again talked about that in different sections of the meeting. It does continue to be our big issue to the single utilisation of resource, even though we're down at 356, I think, as at the 28th. It's still about 22% of our bed base and 24% of our patient stock are classified in this sense. So that's a real opportunity for us. And Mandy, the system improvement director, is putting a lot of focus on that, and I think that could be a real benefit for us going forward. Pay remains our biggest challenge over plan, £31.3 million, and you can see that has been called out due to escalation areas, due to corridor care, and crucially due to not being able to take the CIPs out because we've kept those wards open, at least the no criteria to reside capacity. It's again worth noting that within the position we have received at both sides deficit funding, so £47.7 million at Luft and 16.9 million. Women's, again, whilst that will be replicated in the year to come, the absolute direction of travel is that deficit funding is removed over the foreseeable future. So that should be noted as a non-recurrent benefit. And we did receive a current underwriting for our legal challenging here at Luft. Should I continue, Chair? So just to round off, challenging year, but overall some really good performance within there. However, the underlying position remains needing to be tackled. It is worth noting that the work that we've been doing, collaborating with the LASP organisations, did bear fruit, and we were able to achieve £15 million worth of recurrent savings this year. that is outside of the case for change that has estimated that significant monies can be saved going forward, if we flag rate even closer. So in summary, in terms of risks, you can see that fortunately, risk 8178, we did fail to deliver the expenditure plan. Risk 7963, we did fail, have a shortfall on our CIP plan, despite delivering the highest ever value that we've done. Therefore, our financial sustainability does remain at a 12 for the year.
Thank you. Questions?
Thank you, Chair. Really good to see the report. Obviously disappointing we didn't quite hit the plan, but really good delivery and achievement. Especially good to see the system stretch included in the figures, real benefit of working together. Just a bit of detail really on the risk schedule. It says no cash is required during 25-26, but then alongside that it says a Q1 application is under development. Is that just in case, or is there some cash needed?
Yeah, so absolutely. In the plan for the year ahead, there's a allocated amount of deficit funding. Now, the fact that Cheshire and Merseyside have not had their plan accepted, and certainly without the plan being accepted, the deficit is acceptable, but there's still discussions going on about the allocation of that anyway. So it was a preemptive application done, but again, the environment has got a lot stricter from NHS, so they're not really inclined to respond with cash. I think they will look for groups to resolve cash issues between themselves where they can, and that includes collaborations such as last.
Just wondered, how we go from one year to the other. So you mentioned it's about 44 million, is it? Shortfall on CIP. Currently, that's the millstone we sort of carry forward with this. How's that being dealt with in how we're planning for CIP? Do we add that as a figure? Is that still there as part of our CIP target, or do you roll it into the figure we quote for next year? How do you do that?
Well, it's incorporated in our overall plan for next year. So £117.2 million of CIP. I suppose what we're saying is, if we had delivered recurrently the CIP and taken those costs out on a recurrent basis, then we wouldn't need to have 117 million.
It would be 44.
It'd be less.
It'd be less. So it is actually rolled into that. So when we look at that, the reason it's higher is because we've actually not achieved.
And that's built up over a number of years.
Yes, absolutely. It's that one thing sort of forward. So yeah. Okay. So is that sorry, just asking. So is that worsening next year than the level that we're doing? Is it a recovery, an improvement, or have we added to it? Is it still on the rise?
Well, the CIP, and again, bearing in mind that the conversations are ongoing, and also bearing in mind that we continue to make representation for the new hospital long present. So that's not included in our plans, but the CIP is more or less like for like. So if it's 114 at the moment, 114.7 million, this year was our plan, 17.2 next year. So
it is actually sort of levelling out.
It's leveled, yeah. We'll touch on this a bit in the private session later and talk about NHS plan, but we've sort of levelled out an underlying position last year about at the end of this year about 130. If we deliver everything we currently next year, we get down to 95.
Because that's what you need to do, is you need to stop the increase.
Yeah,
so once it starts to level, then you can look at it.
We've stopped the increase, it's starting to reduce. The issue is, of course, that the assurance that I want to discuss later is a similar performance on recurrent non-recurrent split in this year's CIP that we're now in would leave us static. So we anticipate a circa 35 million reduction overall in the underlying position if the CIP is delivered in full recurrently. Every year, because we've got very large CIPs, partly because we're also carrying that new hospital coverage. If we get a 75%, 70% hit rate on 100 million CIP, we're going to be broadly about where we started. We're just going to.
So if the idea that cash support is not used or probably in line with that, they'll want to see an increase. That's going to be part of it.
But also the risk that the sort of the condition now is that if you don't achieve your plan, the cash support will be repayable. So if you do achieve your plan, it isn't. So that's this thing of it's the double bubble issue, isn't it? If we don't hit the plan recurrently, we don't see the underlying position improve by 35 million. Also, potentially, we've got to pay back on them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm disappointed with this. So there's lots of factors at play depending on the actions of others around criteria to reside, pressures that have led to keeping escalation open long. Our two main sites were miles off, Royal and Aintree are miles off the recurring savings that we're committed to. That is after higher than previously delivered levels of saving. So the positive about this is we're delivering higher levels. But the issue for us as a board is we said we'd do something, we haven't done it. Both in terms of the plan that we set out and the mechanisms to get there. I was talking to James earlier about whether James and Rob and the team will talk about it. Yes, I think we've taken too much comfort on the bottom line on the CIP and not challenged enough on the recurring. We've always known there's this gap in traces. The example is all the way through the year, when we've had site reports, we've smiled and nodded appreciatively at the broad green thing where Heather and then Natalie have said, yeah, we're on course. We're on course. We're not like Royal. Actually, we're on course. Then when we look at the summary in Tim's paper, very small proportion of the broad green savings are recurring. So we sort of took assurance on that, but all we're assured is that we're kicking the problem forward into the year that we're now in. And so I think it's good delivery against a plan in which we made that we need to consider if we were realistic enough about where we need escalation capacity, if we were realistic. And the acid test of control on pay, we lost in month one and we never got back. So there's something we need to learn about how we both have the most challenging and realistic plan we have and how we deliver it. So the two things we want to see is one, should we even count non-recurring savings, which are very welcome against the CIP? Because we, in my view, we take false comfort from that, and all we're doing is kicking the can down the road. And secondly, how can we test more in our plan whether we're making realistic assumptions about what actual capacity is going to be? The pay variance has, number of people employed, has been the problem for 2 years.
Who wants to comment? But if I could just respond on that point, I did test this morning at the relevant conversation. The reporting around Royal Green, the volume response, I think it was clear that we have highlighted the risk. It doesn't change the fact that the assurance has been on recurrent. So, just from a governance perspective, I did come back and show we have highlighted the non-recurrent nature, but it doesn't excuse the fact it's still on. When we get into the R2 this afternoon, I'll give a bit of flavour around some of the complexity of this when you get into the detail of it, because the more you sort of look at the pay position and the inability to shift the pay position, we're also putting it into context of an organisation that's lined out special measures and had to address 75% fill rates. So we've got the success of the CQC on the one hand, fill rates now being where they should have been, the numbers of doctors on ward being where they should have been, they've all been baking in additional pay that goes to cost to the tune of about 6 to 8 million a year more by getting to the right levels of fill rate, which is clearly the right thing to do for patients and what should have been there. But when your baseline starts from an organisation that was a skeleton where it should have been, that's killing us as well, because as fast as we're taking headcount, agency, working on bang, we're now managing to appoint doctors and nurses. You then look at, well, okay, but if we didn't have the criteria to resign problem, that would at least mitigate it. So there's lots of ins and outs to it that almost describe the problem but don't offer much of a solution. So we're going to have to, I think, well, I'll come to the party today. We have to take a different tack, which is, I don't believe we can resolve the pay costs without having some serious inroads into non-patient facing services. We're going to have to make a big change to some non-patient facing services, because the benchmark we're working against, without that new hospital funding covering the cost of pay of doctors and nurses, we're going to have to take some things. So I'll come to that bit later on, part two, but I think it's a really question.
Just on two points really. Can you give us a flavour of month one in terms of how that's looking without too much detail? Secondly, in terms of CIPs, there's more scrutiny from the centre now with Mandy Magdalene, who already alluded to that, and touching on David's point in terms of the governance and the assurances that they're receiving. So you're obviously having to give more assurances to the centre, which I think would be useful for the board to hear more about going forward as well. And on that point, I mean, you may want to cover this afternoon, but with that review with Mandy Nagra, is that sort of providing assurances and progress reports, or is that more of a push from the centre in terms of how we ought to be tackling and approaching some of the projects?
I think we'll cover some of this because if we're in this odd situation at the moment of a lack of clarity perhaps between the ICB, the region and ourselves about what the numbers are. We're very clear what we know, but there seems to be some unusual alignment is all I can say. It feels like where people are playing back to us their view. So as Tracy said, arresting that underlying deficit and starting to bring it down is key, whereas we've got national slides saying it's worse. We've got regional teams saying, oh, that's not what I think. So there's a bit of a reconciliation process going on there. We know what the numbers are, so that's a relief. But it seems odd that we're still in this debate about where we actually are. So I'll cover some of that this afternoon.
And in terms of the month one question, I can't give you too much detail. What I will say, because we now report weekly CIP actually, so can say that about 4.2 million were transacted items at this point in time out of the 12.7, and that we lost about 31 million. So again, we're seeing
Rob, the current nature of those.
I haven't got that detail to hand. But the challenge we set everyone, certainly on the corporate side, was actually
the details.
But in that it's up to, we've said 13 million identified out of a 31 million programme with only 47 weeks left. So it's going to be difficult to keep up to speed recurringly while we still haven't got programmes lined up.
I'll come to it in part two, but I'm taking some action this week around the turnaround process. Fill that gap. Okay.
Any final points on the finance? Thank you, Rob. With suite of papers now, Heather, for you to run us through health and wellbeing framework, people, guardian, and global group culture.
And given they've got similar themes, I'll pick them up all together if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
So the health and wellbeing biannual progress report, a bit of a theme here throughout these three reports that We're starting to bring these teams together across the group, so across the Luft organisations and the women's. So there's a varying degree of maturity in that, and that will get better as we bring the teams together, but some will seem still a little bit separate. There's also a transition going on between what we're doing at group and Tim's report and what is now getting pushed to site and what's taking the accountability of the site teams. They're just taking the health and wellbeing one first. It's key to say that they are currently aligning their priorities across the sites, and that again is going to be including Liverpool Women's and Luft organisations. Just for the next couple of quarters, because we report on a 6 monthly basis, there's a big piece of work looking at health needs assessment, which is linked in with health inequalities, which is really good that we're going to actually start thinking about all of the needs of our people rather than building out health and wellbeing initiatives based on just because they're there. But we're going to look at what people need from the organisation. We're also still targeting areas of mental health and stress risk assessments with clear targets on how we will embed those within the sites. The Life at Luft staff support offer we're going to rebrand, so we need to look at that as a group, but actually both parts of the organisation are keen to progress that. And then we have reformed the Health and Wellbeing Group, which is a bi-monthly meeting. Sarah is our NED lead, our NED champion for wellbeing, and is stitched into that. So again, that is there to make sure that we're focusing on the priorities. So a couple of areas that just to pull out for this paper, there will be pushing into the site, so they will have health and wellbeing plans as part of their people plans, but disability, neurodiversity and women's health is going to be a key focus for the sites that period. This first paper was just asked to receive assurance on the progress made in terms of embedding health and wellbeing. The next paper I will go on to is the Freedom to Speak Up paper. And I'm just going to talk against the overarching paper. I won't go into detail of the individual reports. But again, this paper is there to try and highlight where we are coming together as Freedom to Speak Up guardians across both Liverpool Women's and Luft organisations. We have to actually provide 2 separate reports, otherwise we would have brought these together as part of our statutory requirement as 2 statutory bodies. But actually the overarching report notices where we are similar and where maybe there are differences. So again, I won't go into those. You've all got those to read. One of the key things I would pull out is the reflection tool. There's been a huge amount of work on this in Aintree Royal, LCL, in Luft organisations, and they are working on those at site level. Liverpool Women's is yet to do that, and I believe that the Guardian Syria Women's is starting to work on that with the HLT. Just further on the Freedom to Speak Up, we previously we've not had great sight at the corporate. As we push things into sites, it becomes evident that the corporate departments don't have that oversight. So we're now having a report into the group SMB, and we're noticing that estates and facilities particularly is an area that we will need to focus in on in terms of their increasing concerns. One of the things pulling out from the Liverpool Women's report is that they have done a review of their services, and there's some interesting feedback, mainly positive, around the service that is offered. So that is something that the group want to look at going forward in terms of how we can do that across the group. And just finally on that report, since these reports were written, the Guardians are pulling together a focus group to look at what would a group model look like for a Freedom to Speak Up service. Myself and Mike met with the National Guardian Office lead, and she confirmed that we do have to have separate reports, but actually we could align our approach, which is what we're going to do. because I won't go into detail. The reason I'm not going into detail here is because actually the site, it's very much how the triangulation happens at site level. It's the final report on culture. So the culture paper, and it's here to give us its monthly update of where we're up to on culture. There has been a significant, again, these are two papers that have been brought together. There's a significant effort to try and bring the cultural work together now. This paper brings both of those together, but it is really clear when you look at this paper that there are different stages that we're at from a Liverpool Women's. So some of that will be addressed in the group work, but some of it will be aligned to the kind of line work that we've been doing. The women's and the anti-racism work is really strong in the women's will be going over to progress to date. It's clear to say that in the last year we've been building foundation in terms of our culture work. We're beginning to see the stat survey stabilise. It's declined a little bit in the Liverpool Women's, but actually we understand the reason behind that. I won't go into that here, but actually we are in a position of stabilisation. We have moved from being in that sort of diagnostic and engagement place to being much more engaged in deeper, more bespoke cultural change across the group. So the plan now really is to start embedding some of this change across the whole organisation. So that's what we'll be focusing on in 25-26. We've got a set of priorities there, which remain, which I strongly believe that strong leadership commitment and ownership at local level is really key. We're going to be looking at a coordinated approach to ED&I, specifically anti-racism and how we approach that. Leadership capability is a continued theme across all sites, and we continue to invest in that leadership programme. And then the people plans that we'll have seen and heard feedback from Nat and Jen this morning and Jenny around how they are building their own site-based people plans, which will have more localised culture improvement commitments in there. So I will end there, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Trevor.
James. Yeah, just a plea really that as we start to build the way forward across the group, that we actually learn from who are better at it than us, and certainly being in NHS for the last couple of months, I can see so many things there that are really outstanding. I mean, the best staff survey results in the country. And we might say it's easier for smaller organisations or specialist organisations or all that, or people who haven't got AEs, but you only have to look at where they sit within the benchmark specialist trust, and they're right at the far end of that as well. There's a lot that they're doing there that I think we need to learn from. So as we get into this, key attributes was taking strengths from different organisations, wasn't it? So we really must bring them and Bolton, who have got a good results as well, and contribute into the discussions early, because I think they've got some things that we've got.
So both the Free to Speak Up Guardians and the OD teams are not just meeting as the existing group, they're meeting with us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Heather. I think we need to also focus down on the impacts and the outcomes. So I think I hear that the health and wellbeing paper, that's more forward-looking, so it's scoping and forward-looking. But the culture change paper is year 2 of 3, and it's quite strong on assertion and almost silent on numbers and outcomes and impacts. And I think we've got to get beyond these the activities that we've done into this is the difference that it's made.
Thank you. David, and then Jeffrey.
Really what Mike's saying there, that being able to monitor the impact is important. And I've said before, I think, as we bring the reports together, could we retain the analysis of freedom to speak up delivery that we currently record in live? As a net, I take great assurance that there are hardly anybody who wants to speak up anonymously, but they're quite happy to speak up and either confidentially or open and make their views known. That gives me that gives me hope for the organisation with people who've got the confidence. They can put themselves forward and raise issues. So could we continue to keep that? I know it's not, you can't pick that out from the women's report. I don't know what happens at the other last trusts, but I'd really like to see that retained. Good reports.
Jeffrey.
Thank you. I agree with both Mike and David said. Just on that point, when I had a couple of anonymous complaints as they said, which I dealt with 10. Culture eats strategy of breakfast is the phrase, isn't it? And I think following on from our previous conversation about the money, this is where it gets really tight in terms of getting it right, because many organisations fail because they're just going through a cost cutting and ignoring the fact that what does that say to people? What is it like to work here? So I think we'll come up with this afternoon, but I think we need to be really focused in supporting the book to change and not seeing us cash cow to demolish, and especially going forward in the challenge we'll face this afternoon.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Heather. Excellent. Welcome, Diane.
There's no me on the screen.
I'm disappointed you haven't come to the meeting, but yeah. In the layout in this room here, the screen is very big, so you're dominating the room. On the other end, on the other end of the camera. With perinatal quality surveillance dashboard again. David, are you starting with us or straight to Diane? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's it. David is down on the agenda. I think just before Di comes in on the perinatal dashboard, we would ordinarily have 2 items under this in terms of the CNST and the perinatal dashboard. So just to remind the board that we submitted year 6 with compliance against all 10 safety actions. We haven't had a formal response to that, but we're quite confident that they will be met. Year 7 is just launching now, and so from next month you will see compliance against year 7 safety standards. They're reviewed every year. We're not seeing any big changes through that. So just to note that we will see compliance against year 7 when it's formally comes through next month. I may want to add to that, but I'll hand over to her to do the perinatal dashboard.
Okay, thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Chair. Apologies for not being in person. I've stepped out of chairing quality and safety, hence the reason I've jumped on Teams. So this report is very well versed and it's a familiar report to the Board of Directors now in terms of our approach to perinatal quality surveillance. The detail within this report is discussed extensively locally, led by our midwifery and obstetric colleagues. It's overseen by divisional boards, and of course gets a thorough review within the Hospital Management Board on site at Liverpool Women's. It is part of our maternity incentive scheme, as you will be aware, and relates predominantly to Safety Action 9. There's a significant amount of detail in the report, and I will assume that the report is read, and obviously happy to take any questions thereafter. I think there's some detailed information there around perinatal mortality, which is always an issue that we just need to clarify to make sure that there is a difference between the adjusted stillbirth data and the non-adjusted stillbirth data. And of course, hopefully that explanation is clear in there. There's some feedback from maternity and newborn safety investigations, MNSI, and it was almost assuring to see that we've had that case that's come back and there was no lapses in care for Liverpool Women's. We've got ongoing information there around PSIIs and of course learning from any legal claims. Importantly, there's a narrative section in here around the board safety champions, and those continue to exist in terms of both oversight, regular walkabouts, visibility, engagement with our frontline colleagues. And I'm pleased to say that the issues that have been identified in there have been resolved. I won't bore you with the details around our birthing pool, but we've just had some issues sourcing from a company, but those will be resolved very, very quickly. No other area really to pick up other than where there is exceptions to those KPIs, they're being overseen rigorously by the local teams. And as Jenny suggested, once we get
the MS7 detail, which has been released, and we understand what that is, what that means, we will report through the board. But at this stage, it's very much business as usual, with oversight and scrutiny from the local maternity neonatal system, which we meet with them on a regular monthly basis, and there's touch points throughout the month really on each of those metrics. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Diane. James.
Thanks. I should probably know the answer to this, but on the table where we've got all the sort of the red and green metrics, on the PALS and PALS Plus numbers, they're on a pretty consistent year round. In April 24, it says we had 0. Was that an error, or was that a process that only started in May? I can't remember now.
Yeah, it's an error in reporting. Apologies for that. So it's just that they haven't pulled through, because we try and track both PALS and PALS Plus, because we just want to make sure, obviously, that we're not just focusing on those formal complaints, because our approach is very much early resolution. So it's important that we track those themes and trends as well. So I don't know why there's a note there, but I'll pick that up and have a look at it.
It is generally consistent, isn't it? First quality, so I would imagine. Thanks.
Thank you, Sue.
Just on that point, complaints. Is that included with how figure do we monitor? Sorry if I missed it.
Yeah, formal complaints is a few rows higher up, so you've got formal complaints there, and incidents that are away. So it's in the feedback section.
Okay, thank you, Father. Yes, thank you, thank you.
Yes, Jack.
So I just think I'd like the board to be aware that as board safety champions and the work that we're doing with Jenny as well and Diane, that there was a 4-hour meeting on the CNST year 7 standards, which we went joined in via Teams, but also on the walkarounds we're now picking up more operational issues, aren't we? So I think it's a lot stronger in where we're going with that. So I think it's getting much more positive. So thank you.
Becky and Tom.
Quick question on adjusted stillbirth rates. What would the best units in the country be reporting? We benchmark ourselves against them. I've no feel for that.
Okay, so really good question. I think if our obstetricians were here and our neonatologists, they would say that there is a national ambition, and it's very well recognised ambition through Embrace and all of the national reports, that there is an ambition to have 0 stillbirths and reduce by 25%. We've exceeded that target at Liverpool Women. So the national target that was set, which is part of our maternity incentive scheme, which is the Saving Babies' Lives bundles that you see, which are those series of actions that you'd anticipate to be delivered reliably. We can demonstrate good compliance with those, and we've exceeded that reduction. So it's not something that we tend to benchmark with, because the variables in care and both our population that we serve and the comorbidities and complexity of that population, it will be really hard to compare. But the Embrace data and the data that comes through mortality reviews and the mortality data that Chris presented at the last board is that comparison, if that kind of makes sense.
Jenny, if you
No, I think Di's covered it.
the other points on this, it's good report forward. Okay, thank you very much, Diane.
Thank you.
See you. Thank you. John, next, the Luff Guardian of Safe Working for report.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it is Luff, because we currently have a vacancy at the Women's regarding safe working, but there is a identified funding and a process underway to get someone in place, and the expectation is that we will if that will form part of the team. We've currently got 3 individuals. We've got 2 site-specific guardians of safe working and an overarching supremo is Philip Westwood. The report, I think it's fairly straightforward. We do encourage exception reports on junior doctors when they're not happy. Not happy when they feel there's a concern. There are quite a lot of immediate safety concerns still being registered. The majority of those are on the entry sites, and they are in relation to surgical services. I think it's important probably just to specify that registering of an immediate safety concern is a registration at the time, usually by a junior doctor, either with a colleague who's not there through sickness or absence for other reason,
or an excessive workload, and it's registered at that point, it's not saying I've seen something bad happen to someone, and that's a safety concern. And fortunately, there isn't. The triangulation has been done to ensure that when those ISCs are investigated, are they associated with the actual patient safety incidents? And I've been reassured by speaking to the our guardians that fortunately is not generally the case. But clearly, a high number of ISCs is something that is not being ignored. Each individual event is managed as well as possible by the individuals on the ground. I think hopefully now we've got a maturing medical staffing function at both sites that we will start to see better responses to those, because I think it has been a bit shouting in the void to some extent, and I think that will get better. And otherwise, a fairly straightforward report, hopefully, and happy to take any questions. Thank you, John. Jeffrey.
Can I ask about the delay in paying the locums? Just to specify how long that delay was, and what's the timescale for getting the process right?
Yeah, I think that there's an ongoing narrative about delayed pay, and we get this from the LNC, and there have certainly been some frustrating delays in payment. My observation in recent months is that actually those, particularly with our as I say, our medical workforce and medical staff and functions, is actually those are not eliminated, but it's not happening in the way that it was. And the narrative is that it is still an ongoing issue. Sorry.
If I can, so I think we just need to clarify that it's not necessarily a payroll issue, it's a compliance pre the shift being undertaken. It's following good governance around 642 process around booking of locums, whereas I think there's last minute booking taking place, and then afterwards it's trying to sign off the request and get it sorted. So part of our medical staffing review and what John's referred to around now having established medical staffing teams at site is putting that good governance in ahead of the shift being worked, and then we're reducing the issues with payments.
So the morale, but it's not good.
Absolutely, but it to be fair, it's not a core HR issue, it's a service line operational issue that we need to pick up with the operational leaders. So that's what we've done at site.
And did you want?
And that's this answer.
Okay, thank you. Any other points on this report? So, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but I think the sort of summary and overview of the report has been consistent with the previous quarters. Yeah. And was it 12 months ago we had a presentation? Yeah, June document. We continue to. You've made reference to someone as a supremo. We like supremos. Can the supremo so that now in the group structure we can have reports from all constituent organisations. That's the expectation. That's the plan going forward as to how this will be presented.
So by the time we get to Q1 next year, we should have something in place this organisation.
Yeah, I think it'll be the next quarter.
Okay, thank you, John. We move on to talk about the violence prevention and reduction standards. David.
Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. Your papers here for your information. I think most of us have seen this a little bit earlier on in the year when I brought a paper explaining what the new NHS violence prevention reduction standards contained. We've done our self-assessments across the LUFT part of the group, and you can see that the scores there are very positive for us, that we are fully compliant in 22 of the areas, partially compliant in 21. There are no areas of non-compliance. There is an action plan for those areas of partial compliance, and that is contained within the body of the paper, and the planned completion of that action plan is by the end of Q3 25-26. What I'd already sort of noted on my own papers, but James mentioned it also, is that this only looks at the LUFT side of the group. And so what I'm doing is I'm making contact with the security service that looks after Women's Hospital to ask for their completion of the safety standards to be presented at the Women's HLT. And then when I bring the paper back in 6 months' time, it will be a combined paper of both. So we have an oversight of compliance across the whole of the group at this stage. It would be my expectation that we would put into the forward internal audit plan for 26-27 an internal audit process just to ensure that we're marking ourselves appropriately.
Thank you. Point to question, Mike first.
Thanks, David. I get that this is about a paper about compliance against standards. Where do we do the work about our analysis, our assumptions of why there's an increase in all of this, and then triangulate this piece of work against that analysis?
So there was I made mention earlier on before of building a kinder and safer Luft, and that's the area. It used to be the violence prevention reduction group, but it's wider than that because what we want to do is we want to bring the cultural work that's happening within the organisation, and so there's a whole series of improvements initiatives within that group, and we monitor those on a monthly basis about what metrics they are to be able to demonstrate around an improvement. Some of them are sort of environmental, to make sure our environment both meets the needs of our patients, but also provides a calming therapeutic environment, as well as a good place for our colleagues to work.
Nothing.
It's just on my point. So at site level, we know where those increases are. So here, the ED was a key area, particularly sort of intoxicated, aggressive patients. So we've had dedicated actions to support the ED. So the wearing of personal body cams, dedicated security presence in the waiting room, things that through David's group we've been supporting in place. And then the rest is generally, it's the dementia delirium type patients on the wards, which is also linked to our lighting criteria. So yeah, but at site level, we know where those areas are and the actions focus.
Okay.
That was my point earlier, really, in terms of do we see at board that over your question, Mike? So we might see it at site, but is it something that we should see at board from a violence, given it's a rising violence and aggression?
I was going to propose that at a future opening presentation to trust board that the security and the kind of safer Luft group team come and present some of the work that we're doing on some of that violence and aggression reduction.
Thank you.
And perhaps we could tie that into the later report later this year.
Thank you. Look forward to that. Well, I'm looking at the screen, as I said at the start, with teams today, and I noticed that Robin Birch has got a hand up. But Robin, in protocol of the meeting, not taking inputs now from outside of the board, but we'll pick up with you after the meeting the points you want to raise or any concerns. Any other points on this? Jeffrey, sorry.
I think at this point, well noted, and I think at the board we don't necessarily see where the hotspots are. My instinct would tell me it would be ED and those living with dementia. But I think we're good to see that presented here, and also perhaps a member staff story in terms of I've done sessions at I was at ED and I was at Whiston. Some of the things the staff have to tolerate are just outrageous.
So actually, we could bring something. This is very conscious you asked that. So I'm rewritten the policy that we use to deal with patients who have challenging behaviours of concern to staff within our organisation around a warning, a final warning, and potentially exclusion of care. And so there's an appeals process that's been incorporated in there before I want to circulate the document to colleagues for greater consultation. We're actually piloting the appeals process tomorrow on a live case. And so we're doing all of that so we could bring in some of those statements of impact.
The other issue is often a lot of the ward, you've got young people and there's no place for anyone in the country. And so staff, you have to have endless staff supervising impacts on other patients and that patient as well. So when I was at Wiston, we wrote to the members of parliament to raise it, and it was raised, but there's no answer because there's sometimes no secure bed. Often the most violent patients.
So please.
We talked about violence, staff and patients. Do we have an issue or concern over staff and staff?
Yes.
Right. I'm sorry.
Sorry, that came out really quickly. Didn't mean it to be aggressive. I'll check myself. Yes, we do. Thank you for asking that. We monitor that, and so it's both physical and verbal aggressive behaviours. And we obviously will look at different approaches. So some of that will be around an individual case, but then what are those general themes, and is it around putting people in, essentially putting people into leadership roles without preparation and education, people behaving in appropriate ways.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, David, received.
Thank you.
But you still holding the mic on the risk management front?
Yeah, so on the risk management strategy, we're not taking it for approval at today's meeting. There's further consultation that take place. We had a discussion at the audit committee for Liverpool Women's yesterday. It's due to come to the senior management board, which is the internal place in terms of the rules of engagement, so that we can ensure that any views and feedback from sites have been taken into account. And it will be presented for approval at the board.
Thank you.
If anyone did have any comments prior to the board that they wish to be taken into account, if you can send them through to myself or David, and we'll ensure it's in the final version.
Thanks, Daniel. Okay, into the governance section. Liverpool Adult Youth Spectrum Providers Joint Committee update and short report.
Yeah, nothing really to report, share on through the risk management strategy. We've got nothing major to report. The decisions we're capturing the key issues. We effectively used the session for a discussion about the roadmap, which was suggested as sort of acceleration of that roadmap. So basically what we've done is taken that for decision via the various boards of directors, which was yesterday. Obviously we'll discuss that further.
Thank you. And the declaration of interest and committee terms for to receive.
Yeah, so obviously this is in line with the NHS guidance on managing conflicts of interest. We've just sort of changed the format of the report, so it's very clear where there are new declarations and where we have removed declarations. Obviously, following today's presentation, it will go onto the website in line with practice. Similar, sort of picking up on an issue that you raised before about how we get these arrangements across the group. Obviously, this at the moment covers both Liverpool Women's, but also Loft. Within Liverpool Women's, the declaration of interest process is being aligned with the Loft process, and it will be recorded on ESR for all members of staff going forward, and that's due to be implemented in Q1. We're also doing some work about standardising and revising and developing a new policy on the conflicts of interest so that it's consistent across all LASP trusts, and that's involving the chief people officers, but also the company secretaries in that organisation. The policies are due to be updated and come to senior management board in June, so that when trusts come into the group, it's a policy that they're already using and there's not further change there. So that will come back in June. So it's just here for approval today, Chair.
Sorry, can I just?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, David. No, it's fine. The declarations are right, Danny, but I'm just spotted. I'm down as Group Medical Director, which is slightly out with my area of expertise rather than Group Managing Director.
Yeah, I hope no one knows. Okay, we'll make that change.
In terms of the terms of reference, obviously as part of each year we do evaluations on the effectiveness of board committees. As you've seen, we've done the hospital management boards that came through in the site report. We've also undertaken this for 4 committees, the 2 audit committees and the 2 charitable funds committees. We've made some changes which are set out within the paper, but basically the audit ones, the main changes were clarity on the audit committee's responsibilities for criminal audit. We've also updated job titles in line with UHLG. On charitable funds, the main change was the appointment, obviously, and the inclusion of the independent chair that's now been ratified at the board. The final committee for strategy and partnerships, we're going to be reviewing in Q1, and that will come to the next strategy and partnerships committee. So following that, if there are any changes to the terms of reference, we'll bring them back to the subsequent board meeting. But obviously for the board of directors to approve the change to the terms of reference of those committees.
Intent to approve, please. Thank you. Approved. LWH unitary governance.
So in relation to the BAF, obviously this sets out the position changes of the most significant strategic risk during Q4. The audit committee yesterday reviewed the effectiveness of BAF arrangements and did a bit more analysis over the changes over the whole year. In Q4, there's been no changes to the score, any of the scores in Q4. This was reviewed by the Liverpool Women's Hospital Management Board prior to today's. At the current position is there is one significant risk remaining, which is in relation to isolated sites, 4 serious and 4 moderate. Over the year, the target score, and obviously when risks are first established, you set a target score, i.e. if all the actions actually that you've planned have been delivered, will that reduce the level of risk to a manageable level? That was achieved on one risk, which was in relation to risk 6, organisational change. Over the year, there have been changes. There's been decreases to 4 of the risks, risks 5, 6, 8 and 9. But 5 of the risks, there's been an unchanged score during the whole of the 12 months on 1, 2, 3, 4 and 7. I think whilst, as the audit committee heard yesterday, whilst the risk score has remained unchanged, we've had a look to say that are some of the individual corporate risks that feed into the BAF, we have seen mitigating actions and a reduction in some of the risk levels, but it's been determined that the overall effect on the strategic risks haven't led to a change in the risk score. MIAA have undertaken, as part of their end of year process, a review of our assurance framework arrangements, and they reported to the audit committee substantial assurance in relation to the process. There are a small number of recommendations that the committee heard yesterday and will be taken into effect as part of the development of the new BAF. As we mentioned earlier, there is a workshop next week which is aiming to consider and develop a new board assurance framework set of strategic risks and collect ideas from board members. That's going to be next Tuesday. So happy to take any questions. Tracy, I didn't know if you want to input anything on from the audit committee yesterday, or if anyone's got any questions.
Generally about the thing.
Or the BAF.
Or the BAF, yes. I mean, actually reported that quite. And apart from that, the audit committee was sort of heading towards year end, etc. So recommendation from external.
Substantial assurance is very welcome.
And substantial assurance. So that's good.
Thank you. Any other points? I've gone to the wrong person twice so far, and it's with some trepidation, Jeffrey, that I turn to you. Charitable funds assurance report.
Very short report. It's all relatively short. We approved the terms of reference 25-26 on the side of the business, the operational plan, the refunds, refusals and returns policies approved. The most exciting item on the agenda was the approval of the Mini Miracles Ball, which will be held next April with a forecast service of 77,000. So those are aspirations for Strictly Come Dancing. think you've done 6 years out really, and contributions to that were very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Loughborough Unitary Governance.
Yeah, so again, in the BAF, there's been 2 changes to proposed risk scores in Q4. These relate to risk 1 elective activity. The scores reduced from, proposed to reduce from 12 to 10. Improvements, reduction in likelihood, but also the strength of controls. The other one that's changed is risk 12, research and innovation, proposed score change from 9 to 7, again, because of likelihood and controls. There remain 2 significant risks for the organisation, and we've heard quite a lot today in this site report in relation to urgent and emergency care and also financial sustainability. Both of those remain as significant. There are 2 serious risks and 9 moderate. I think over the whole year, we've reviewed it. 11 of the 13 risks have seen a reduction of score over that 12-month period. In the inherent score, but there are 2 risks, i.e. the ones that are significant, that whilst we've seen little bits of movement, they remain at exactly the same as the initial score when they were set. And they were elective and urgent and emergency care. The target risk score has actually been achieved on 5 of the risks, which are 4, 5, 6, 7 and 10. And again, MIAA undertook a audit, and again they provided substantial assurance in terms of the process. So again, happy to take any questions and obviously here for the board to approve.
Thank you. Good paper, good progress made, good structure. Consent to approve, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. David, Audit Committee Assurance Report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The assurance report is there with papers, and I think it. Fair to say, I was a bit disappointed that we didn't have for the meeting the MIA, a head of internal audit opinion at the time of the meeting. But we did after the meeting last week meet with them again. But they gave us their draft head of internal audit opinion, which will give us substantial assurance for 24-25. It's the first time since the merger of Aintree and the Royal and Broad Green that the trust has achieved substantial assurance overall. So I think that's really good. And substantial assurance means that there is a good system of internal control designed to meet the organisation's objectives, and that those controls are generally being applied consistently. So it's great credit to the executive team, the way they have implemented the internal audit recommendations in a timely manner.
Thank you. I mean, one of those areas we sort of have this issue of the 2 statutory bodies with separate committees and separate inspections and so on. And as a group board, there would be an issue for, I'm not sure how we resolve it, if we have different levels of assurance in the equivalent different committees. So now that Loughborough's up to the standards of the women's, it seems that we are in a better place, or are we not?
No, that's what I was saying. Do you want me to generally feed in? Because obviously there's not an assurance for women's. We haven't got our final head of internal audit opinion. We have been slower in getting some of those recommendations and actions closed as we came from Christmas down to the end of the year. And particularly we've had quite a number of high risk, recommendations which we've not cleared, fortunate to the size of the organisation. And at the moment we've got an asterisk on it, but we've got a moderate assurance level on the head of internal audit opinion, which is annoying because we haven't had that for a while. They are still looking at some of the evidence, so there is an outside chance that it could rise to substantial. However, we are running out of runway to suggest that possibly it may stay at moderate, but we've obviously got to wait the next couple of weeks. I think we're very clear on the actions. We've had a lot of discussion. Indeed, I had a separate meeting that Daniel arranged with the internal audit, and I must admit I was fairly grumpy at that meeting. However, I think we had a good audit committee meeting yesterday, and we're very clear on the actions. And it's not, I don't think, going to cause any problems, as far as year end, because it's not good, but it's a drop.
Yeah.
from where we've wanted to be. And we've always been at substantial, so it's annoying.
Is there a combination of Jenny, Rob, James, Daniel, whoever else that we can have a concerted group effort behind this?
Yeah, so to Tracy's point, for the last few months, we have been every week monitoring these, and until about 2 weeks ago, we were at substantial. So for us, it's understanding the changes and how we reverse those in the last couple of weeks, because it's come quite quickly at the end, that change in view. We understand more now around what can flip us into back into substantial, but it was, I'll be honest, it was a bit left field really for us. So we'll work on that. And I met with the auditors as well to understand what had changed in the last couple of weeks. Tracy met with them as well. So at audit committee yesterday, we heard there's still time before the final opinion to call that back. So we will work with them.
Let's use that time. Thank you. Thank you, David. Anything else you wanted to add? Okay. Chris, resolution for corporate trustee.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just as set out in the paper, it's just a formal process as the corporate trustee body for the charity, just for us to enable us to tidy up our fund restructure as we move from 160 funds down to more manageable 30, but some duplication. So just as the filings come through the board, so just agreement from the board.
Please. Thank you. Okay, we come to the end of our formal business. I don't think there's anything that's arisen that blindsided on the risk register. Jenny dealt with the questions. Is there anything else, Holly, that I need to pick up? Okay, so again, questions and answers we'll put forward. Robin, you still there? I know in this chat thingy, you've raised your point, David, and Jess has referred to the formal. Do you mind, David, picking up definitely with Robin?
I'll address that.
What the issues are. And Joe as well. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Right, meeting closed. Very much. Is everyone, I know people will have looked at the timetable and booked phone calls and so on. Is everybody content if we pick up on the private meeting on 30th of June?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. 1:30.